Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere frozen. London, 1800-something, the sort of winter where your breath becomes mist and the cobblestones turn slippery as mirrors. The lanterns burn dimly beneath layers of grime, and even the atmosphere feels recycled from the mills still groaning through darkness. You lower your head against the light rain and notice it's December 24th, though nobody appears to acknowledge it. You won't believe this. Folks in those days didn't even pause for Christmas. For them it was merely another wage day approaching, or another work period to endure. The roads buzz with carriage wheels and horse hooves, and the racket from the metalworks continues well past nightfall. All right, before you settle in too comfortably, go on and hit that like button and subscribe. But only if it feels right to you. Now tell me in the comments your location and what hour it is over there. Lower the lights, switch on that fan for some ambient sound, and let's ease into tonight's small journey. You round a bend near the Thames, tracking the aroma of coal and moist hemp. Overhead, gaslight wavers on the damp metal poles, each one breathing softly, as if weary from the chill too. Beyond the river, storage building windows shine with forges still burning. Within, dock labourers in thick jackets trudge homeward, spines curved, their footwear leaving damp marks that dissolve into the haze. Nobody whistles a melody, no decorative strips, no garlands, just grey upon grey London. This decade is straining at its limits. 6 million souls inhaling the same fumes, pursuing the same emptiness. The mills never rest. The metropolis cannot spare the luxury. Even the paper hawkers half as tall as their bundles cry out stories through numb mouths. The sole brightness arrives from storefront advertisements curling in the moisture. Inexpensive spirits, household cleanser, wonder elixirs promising heat in a container. You stop beside a bakery display. A solitary pudding rests there, powdered with sweetener like frost on a peak. A small child pushes her nose to the window, her fingers leaving transparent marks on the clouded surface. The baker frowns and pulls the fabric. She hurries away. Somewhere a timepiece chimes 6, and another rotation slips past, unacknowledged down a passage. You detect a different aroma, citrus fruits, uncommon and piercing, tumbling from a wooden box. A gentleman collects them swiftly, too precious to squander. The produce arrived from the Mediterranean via steamboat, and solely those with currency can purchase the indulgence of brightness. During winter, most Londoners survive on cooked root vegetables and hopeful imagination. A mare neighs close by, its handler swears, pulling at the leather straps as he steers a wagon loaded with fuel bags toward a manor house further westward. The metropolis operates on dual powers, coal and hierarchy. Both ignite fiercely, both deposit residue afterward. You pass into a calmer pathway where lamp attendants work steadily. Poles lift to ignite each glass sphere to existence. They resemble phantoms moving through amber fog, illuminating the city's arteries individually. It's strangely tranquil, this mechanical radiance throbbing throughout the roads, even though nobody terms it celebratory. Somewhere distant, a signal screams from a mill rooftop. Rotation transition doors fly open and labourers pour outward, hacking into their garments. Their amusement is short, hoarse, nearly rebellious. A handful exchange quips about the occasion they won't receive, though one gentleman mentions he's caught whispers the Queen personally has adorned a fur within Buckingham Palace. Most dismiss it. Aristocrats exist in separate dimensions. Nevertheless, you sense it, a subtle stirring beneath all this filth like coals, concealed in residue. Something desires to transform, but tonight London remains apathetic. The haze intensifies, consuming the radiance, and your exhalation merges with the city's murmur. You continue forward, footwear grinding on the iced paving, the odour of equine waste and flue grime concentrated enough to sample. Somewhere behind, a pub entrance swings wide, merriment, clashing vessels, and the delicate melody of a stringed instrument escape before the temperature shuts it again. It's not precisely joy, more like individuals attempting to ignore the soreness in their palms. Londoners don't honour the period, they merely withstand it. Beyond the drinking house, an elderly gentleman vends heated nuts from a metal container balanced on masonry. The embers hiss and crack, casting dim sparks that appear nearly enchanting in the pollution. You purchase a portion, charred, ashen, excessively hot to grasp, but the heat penetrates through your coverings. No cathedral chimes tonight, he mentions without raising his gaze. Too costly to sound for a metropolis that doesn't pay attention. You acknowledge. He speaks truth. At the following junction, a public coach rumbles past, its wheels throwing mud. The inscribed slogans guarantee a happier London, but the travellers appear far from content. Office workers with stained digits, household workers in borrowed garments, military personnel on break already partially intoxicated. Everyone gazes forward as though observing the future might prove simpler than observing the present. Through the display of a lending shop dangles a sequence of metal candle holders and damaged string instruments. Adjacent to them, a pile of notices promotes seasonal merchandise. Yet the period signifies something alternative here. Extended hours, icy chambers, and perhaps an additional bread portion if your superior's feeling generous. For the majority of the metropolis, Christmas isn't regarding belief or celebration. It's the boundary between enduring and descending beneath. A lady sweeps her entrance, her exhalation forming clouds as she labours. You inquire why she troubles this late. Prevents the property owner from penalising me, she grumbles, removing ice from the barrier. The contradiction burns everyone, buffing the wretchedness sufficiently to maintain it proper. Still, dispersed indications of transformation flicker through the haze near Covent Garden. A paper youngster waves a recent sheet beneath the gaslight. Stories regarding the royal household's fur imported from Germany, flames dancing on its limbs. Some pedestrians ridicule, others smile weakly. For the initial occasion, the term Christmas appears less like a discarded remnant and more like a trial in happiness. You rotate toward the waterway again. The liquid moves slowly, transporting fragments of ice between vessels. Beyond the embankment you observe one impressive residence, dimly radiating behind delicate drapes. Within, outlines of attendants distribute platters, and the sound of crystal drifts outward into the darkness. Somewhere someone is banqueting. You wonder whether the Queen's fur is shining at that precise instant, its wax trickling like nectar over emerald needles, its decorations sparkling with a variety of luminance common individuals never encounter. A coach travels past, wheels hurling soiled snow against your footwear. The animal's exhalation steams in the gaslight, and momentarily you picture its vapour from a hearth, one you might experience if you existed in another dimension. Yet the coach vanishes, and the chill recaptures you. You enter a confined alley to protect yourself from the breeze. A youngster sleeps twisted beside a barrier, enveloped in a ragged garment, multiple sizes, excessive. His features are crimson from frozen injury, but on his expression something serene. Perhaps he's imagining that palace fur of candle glow and sweetened citrus fruits he's never experienced. Perhaps he's imagining warmth that's not obtained from strangers. Unfortunate. You tighten your garment closer and proceed onward. Somewhere internally, you understand this metropolis's approaching transformation. It doesn't comprehend it yet, how a narrative, a monarch, and a notion will shortly reconstruct the precise significance of winter. For the present, London remains quiet beneath its personal vapour, the weak hiss of gaslight, the sole rhythm in its channels. And within that quietness, the abandoned Christmas of the Victorian era waits, still concealed under residue, but commencing just barely to inhale. Dawn arrives, wan and reluctant, the variety of illumination that doesn't so much ascend as struggle. Through the vapour, the metropolis appears rinsed in silver, you awaken to the clatter of dairy carts and the harsh shouts of street merchants already labouring. For most Londoners, December 25th is merely another labour rotation, a rotation to manage accounts, clean flues and nourish the furnace. You emerge into the road and discover the identical grey current moving through the haze. Youngsters in worn garments dash past bearing bundles of papers. Ladies transport containers of cleaning on their sides, and darkened mill entrances gape like the openings of metal creatures waiting to consume them completely. Even the Thames smells of commerce, its current dragging fragments of residue and wood particles toward the ocean. At a close mill, you observe a sequence of gentlemen and ladies stamping their extremities for heat, waiting for the supervisor to unlock the entrance. Within, the atmosphere will be dense with vapour and lubricant, but at minimum it's warmer than outside. One gentleman mutters that he requested the rotation off to be with his household. His compensation was reduced for the suggestion. The remainder acknowledge without compassion. Time away is an indulgence few can picture. Along the pathway, a young youngster balances a platform of meat pastries on his crown, shouting to draw patrons. The pastries are more shell than content, but they disappear rapidly. Emptiness makes everything taste of possibility. A cart lady purchases one for a fractional coin, dividing it in dual portions to distribute with the infant at her fabric. The vapour twists upward and vanishes into the grey atmosphere, as though embarrassed of how temporary it is. Even in the trading areas, the atmosphere is identical, quick, functional, unsentimental. Meat vendors suspend their portions in the chill. Bread makers arrange portions like building blocks. A handful of stalls vend foliage, berry branches, climbing plants and parasitic greenery, but primarily to wealthy households in the West region. Here in the eastern section, you'd receive unusual reactions for squandering currency on adornment. What benefit is a decoration when the property payment's approaching? You roam through Smithfield trading area, where the odour of crimson liquid, dried grass and ice combines into something mineral. Livestock call behind barriers and handlers shout values. Over the noise, one gentleman jests. They mention the Queen's obtained a fur. Perhaps we'll obtain one when swine soar. The amusement is arid, but it travels. Somewhere past the trading area, a vapour signal shrieks. Another mill beginning its rotation. It's difficult to picture that this metropolis will eventually create the Christmas correspondence, the Christmas fur, the precise concept of the occasion atmosphere. For the present, London's rhythm beats to gain, not tranquility. You pass a lodging structure where a notice is attached to the entrance. Meal serves 7 p.m. animal stew and bread, 1 coin. The odour penetrates through the openings, substantial, with bulbs and skeleton. Within, a dozen gentlemen cluster over metal containers. One hums a melody beneath his exhalation, an ancient folk tune regarding winter and affection departed. The others absorb quietly, utensils suspended. The melody expires before it discovers a conclusion. Outside again, you observe a small movement wind its path along the road. 3 street vendors dragging a wagon adorned with strips. On it rests a deteriorated barrel instrument grinding out an unstable version of a rhythm melody. They travel from junction to junction, hoping for coins, amusement, pursuing the chill away. For an instant, one gentleman grins and mentions, "If London won't provide us a Christmas, we'll construct one personally." It's the initial suggestion you've observed that something human still moves beneath all the residue. Even in a metropolis that's abandoned how to stop, the impulse to discover illumination in the darkness refuses to expire. You track the reflection of the barrel instrument until the melody dissolves behind the roar of the metalworks, questioning if following winter will sound identical, or if something or someone will eventually instruct London to halt. The midday settles like particles, vapour masses suspend so minimal they appear to compress against the rooftops, and the haze transforms the metropolis into a smudged charcoal illustration. You roam toward the impoverished sections near Clerkenwell, where confined alleys compress between leaning structures. Cleaning stiffens on the cords, frozen into configurations of garments and leg coverings that clatter like parchment when the breeze slides through. Here, every entrance tells a narrative. One lady crouches on her platform repairing leg coverings with trembling digits. Behind her, dual children debate over who obtains the warm portion of the masonry pulled from the hearth. Along the pathway, an elderly gentleman sharpens blades, the metal shriek reflecting like a string instrument poorly performed. The metropolis feels animated, but it's the variety of existence that endures out of routine rather than happiness. You halt near a public structure, the equine and wagon, where the noise of amusement escapes outward in explosions. Within, it's warm, hazy, and noisy. Fuel vapour combines with the piercing aroma of spirits. Gentlemen cluster around platforms not to acknowledge the period but to acknowledge departure to another year. Someone shouts, and the chamber roars backward. One gentleman insists that December used to signify something once, something regarding household, regarding hearthsides, but nobody troubles to recall what. They're too occupied consuming the resentment. In the junction, a young lady with substance-stained garments counts coins on a ledger. She labours for a fabric mill and has been instructed to arrive tomorrow, occasion or not. When you inquire if she objects, she smirks. Object? I'd prefer labour. Labour's warmer than residence. She pockets the coins and departs without completing her beverage. Outside, twilight returns before the rotation can properly conclude. Vapour lanterns bloom throughout the road, small golden spheres fighting the darkness. You notice how their illumination doesn't reach the rooftops. It hovers just elevated enough to remind everyone how dark the remainder of the metropolis remains. A delicate drizzle begins tapping on the paving, blurring reflections of the lanterns until the ground personally appears liquid. A coach splashes past, its wheels hurling muddy liquid onto your garment. Within, you glimpse the fabric sleeve of someone significant. Through the clouded display, the traveller raises a vessel and momentarily you observe the shimmer of candlelight within, a private banquet already proceeding. You can nearly smell cooked fowl and hear crystal touching crystal. Then the coach vanishes into the fog and the odour of vapour and drainage returns. By the crossing, a collection of road children cluster around a heating container constructed from a damaged barrel. One youngster pokes the embers and hums something minimal and tuneless. Another strikes his palms to the rhythm. They're constructing their personal music out of the fragments of heat they possess. You remain with them a duration, observing their outlines perform against the barrier. For a pulse, it nearly feels like observation. The breeze increases, bearing snippets of discussion and the noise of waterway liquids slapping mineral. You catch talk of transformation, whispers of fresh mills, of compensation increases, of a certain author scribbling regarding phantoms and kindness. But, for the present, London stays restless, obstinate and weary. As darkness intensifies, the metropolis releases a collective murmur. The vapour lights waver, the trading areas close, the mill horns fall quiet. Individually, for the initial occasional rotation, you can perceive your personal footsteps again. It's not tranquility precisely, merely an intermission before the grind resumes. Nevertheless, in that suspension, something remains. The weak heat of the children's heating container, the whisper of that irregular melody, the temporary image of a fir in a palace somewhere distant away. Perhaps the metropolis hasn't abandoned Christmas entirely. Perhaps it's solely waiting for someone to remind it what heat feels like. The following evening, the haze intensifies to the shade of soiled milk, and you traverse through it as though moving through ancient dreams. Somewhere ahead, the chimes of St. Paul's sound, weakly, partially drowned by the hiss of vapour and the grind of carriage wheels. You cannot observe the cathedral's dome, merely its phantom outline vanishing into the grey. London feels ancient tonight, inhabited by the recollection of winters long departed. You rotate along a calmer road, its paving slick with moisture. The odour of animal fat candles and moist mineral combines in the atmosphere. An elderly book merchant waves you inward from his entrance, beckoning toward a box of illustrations and booklets. Ancient Christmas narratives, he mentions with a twisted grin. Back when the English understood how to construct a racket. You examine through fragile sheets, hymns, banquet records, crude woodcuts of performing peasants. They appear like they exist to another species, the book merchant chuckles. You won't discover much of that, these rotations. We used to adorn every passage, cook swine, consume till the barriers sang. Then arrived the Puritans. Eliminated it all outward, every fragment of it. His vision gleams in the lamplight. You thank him and step back into the drizzle, his words hanging in the fog. A century back, those Puritan laws really did close down Christmas. They banned the feasts, shut down the gatherings, even made playing games illegal. Soldiers used to walk the streets, stopping people from celebrating. You can picture it. Doors locked, taverns closed, the smell of roast goose gone, replaced by ink and order. Tradition crushed under the excuse of discipline. The effect lingers even now. London's wariness of joy feels like it was passed down, as if the city still worries it'll be punished for being happy. Generations grew up treating December like just another mark on the calendar. The laughter stopped, but the caution remained. You follow the twisting streets toward Southwark, where old timber houses lean toward each other like they're sharing secrets. Somewhere behind closed shutters, faint music seeps into the fog, a violin scraping out a tune that sounds older than the city itself. It might have been a dance once, but now it's too slow for that, more like a memory trying to stay alive. A group of dock workers comes out of a tavern arguing about politics and pay. One of them, red-faced and loud, says his grandfather told him stories of the old 12 days, a dozen nights of partying and trouble stretching into January. They'd crown a fool king, throw snow in the streets and drink like tomorrow wasn't real. His friends laugh, but none of them can picture such a thing. The world they know runs on wages, not whimsy. You cross a small bridge slick with frost, the Thames below black as tar. Barges creak against the pilings over the water. Faint lights shimmer from the opposite bank where warehouses sleep under soot. The city looks huge and ancient and yet fragile, like one good laugh could wake it from a spell. Somewhere behind you, the bookseller's bell rings again, his voice fading through the fog. Don't forget what they took, son. Maybe he's right. Maybe the forgotten Christmas of the Victorian age isn't just something missing. It's a wound from an older time, something still healing beneath layers of smoke and manners. You stop at the edge of the river, watching your breath mix with the mist. You can almost feel the ghosts of those lost festivals, the roaring fires, the wild dances, the reckless joy of people who didn't measure life by the clock yet. It feels distant but not gone, like a tune you can't quite remember but still hum anyway. You linger by the river, the cold eating through your coat. When a night watchman walks past, swinging his lantern, he hums a tune so old it sounds almost pagan. Something about ivy and ale. When you ask what it is, he shrugs. Old winter song. My mother used to sing it. They say it's lucky. His breath fogs as he disappears into the murk. You're left with the echo of the melody, faint, defiant, and strangely comforting. It's strange to think that for hundreds of years the English year revolved around feasts and festivals. The end of the harvest meant ale, firelight and feasting that spilled from manor halls to muddy fields. The rich toasted abundance. The poor were invited in to share scraps and stories. For 12 days the rules of class loosened. Then the reforms came, industrial, moral and social. And everything grew sharper, faster, cleaner. Fun was replaced by efficiency. By the early 1800s, any excuse for wild festivity felt outdated, even embarrassing. The new urban middle class preferred respectability to revelry. The factories demanded regular hours. The landlords demanded rent on time. Merrymaking looked suspicious, lazy, even dangerous. London learned to treat silence as virtue and joy as waste. You pass a printing shop where broadsheets are being inked for the morning. A headline catches your eye. Temperance League condemns winter drinking. The paper smells of fresh coal, smoke, and indignation. The typesetter wipes his hands and mutters, "Can't laugh, can't drink, can't sing. They'll take the weather next." He grins, but there's bitterness in it. Further along, you spot a tavern sign hanging crooked above the door, a painted sprig of holly, faded and cracked. The owner is nailing it back into place. You ask why he bothers. "It's tradition," he says, simply hammering the final nail. Then he wipes his hands and adds, "Someone's got to remember." Inside, the tavern smells of wood, smoke, wet wool, and faint rebellion. A few regulars sit by the hearth, swapping stories of the old days. One man swears his grandmother spoke of villages where people dressed as animals and danced through the snow, banging pots to chase away winter spirits. Another recalls bonfires in the square where they'd throw dried herbs to bless the fields. The tales sound half myth, half memory, but their eyes gleam as they tell them. For a moment the room feels warmer. You realise these aren't just stories. They're remnants of a culture that used to celebrate survival itself. Winter was the enemy, and every fire, feast or song was an act of defiance. That instinct, though buried under soot and self-restraint, still pulses faintly through the city. Outside again, the rain eases to a mist. Chimneys puff steadily, turning the skyline into a low forest of smoke. Somewhere behind the clouds, the moon tries to shine through. You pass a group of lamplighters finishing their rounds. One pauses, balancing his pole, and says, "They say the Queen's husbands brought over a new kind of tree from Germany. Candles and all. Strange folk, those royals." He chuckles, unaware that this small detail will soon set an empire's imagination on fire. As you walk away, the air carries traces of that forgotten joy, the kind that survives bans, plagues, and poverty. It hides in the corners of taverns, in the tunes hummed by tired men, in the holly nailed to a door simply because someone remembers. The Puritans may have stripped the flesh from Christmas, but the bones still stand, waiting for warmth to return. And somewhere in the distance, through fog and furnace glow, you sense it coming, the faintest spark of change that will soon turn this grey city golden, at least for a few fleeting days each year. The next morning dawns, with a sky the colour of tin, the kind that promises nothing except cold. You wake in a boarding room off Fleet Street, where the window panes are so frosted they look painted. Below, a horse cart rattles by, iron rims clanging against the cobbles. The driver shouts, "Coal for sale." His voice echoes between the narrow walls before fading into the endless hum of London. You wrap your scarf tight and step out, heading east, where the city grows meaner. The fog tastes of soot. Each breath feels borrowed. The streets grow tighter, the smells sharper, tallow, sewage, old bread and smoke. This is where the forgotten Christmas truly lives. Not in palaces or papers, but in rooms smaller than cupboards and colder than graves. Through a cracked doorway, you glimpse a woman ladling something from a pot. Her hands tremble as she pours it into chipped bowls. Two children sit cross-legged on the floor, each waiting their turn, with the same fixed politeness that only hunger teaches. You lean closer. The pot holds more water than food, thin stew with a few slices of carrot floating like treasure. The mother looks up, her face hollowed by the winter. "It's hot," she says softly, as though temperature alone might feed them. There's no tree, no tinsel, no laughter, just survival. You can almost hear the wind whistling through the cracks in the wall, searching for warmth to steal. Out on the main street, the city doesn't notice. Carriages splash through puddles, wheels coated in black ice. Butchers haul carcasses on hooks, calling prices as if to an audience that isn't listening. Even the beggars look too tired to plead. You pass a boy with a basket of apples so bruised they look like stones. Still, he guards them like gold. At a corner shop, a man sells candles by the dozen. The cheapest are made of animal fat and smell faintly rancid when lit. Better than darkness, he tells you, rubbing his hands for warmth. You buy one, if only to feel the wax's faint heat against your palm. When he hands you change, his fingers are blue. Further along, a factory chimney leans against the sky, coughing black smoke over the rooftops. A group of women file out for a break, faces pale beneath soot. They crowd around a brazier, laughing softly. One pulls from her pocket a scrap of cloth embroidered with red thread, 2 crooked initials and a heart. "Made it from leftovers," she says, "for my sister's baby." The others murmur approval. In a place where everything is rationed, even affection must be stitched from scraps. A brass band of soldiers marches past, their boots synchronized and clean. Children stop to watch, their eyes wide, their hands still wrapped around half-eaten crusts. For a moment, the grey world feels theatrical, like the city is pretending to be alive. Then the band turns a corner and the music fades back into the factory drone. You cross into a courtyard where laundry lines hang heavy with rags. Someone's pinned up a small green branch, a sprig of holly maybe, stolen from a wealthier district's hedge. It flutters in the breeze like a flag of defiance. You imagine it's her way of saying, "We may be cold, but we're still here." The night before you'd felt London's history weighing it down. Now you feel its humanity fighting back even when the cupboards are empty. People find a way to craft meaning out of nothing, to share broth, to give a bit of colour, to hang a single green leaf against the grey. It isn't much, but it's something the city's rules can't take away. And for the first time, as snow begins to fall, soft, hesitant, like it's forgotten how, you realise that maybe this is where the rebirth of Christmas begins. Not in marble halls, but in rooms like this, where warmth is an act of rebellion. You keep walking, the snow now gathering along windowsills and curling into the corners of doorways. It softens the sounds of the city, muffles the clang of carts and the shouts of traders. For a moment, even London seems unsure of itself, like it's caught between the urgency of industry and the hush of something older, slower. In an alley, behind a print shop, you see a small figure crouched beside a grate where steam leaks from the floor. It's a boy, maybe 7 or 8, with no gloves and shoes, so thin they may as well be paper. He's holding a tin spoon in one hand and a lump of stale bread in the other. He doesn't eat yet. He just sits watching the steam, letting the warmth kiss his cheeks. When he notices you, he grins. "Warmest spot in the city," he says. "Don't tell the others." You ask where he'll sleep tonight. "Same place as always." He shrugs, nodding toward a stairwell under the bakery. "If the rats get there first, I give them a crust and they let me be." His voice isn't bitter, it's matter of fact, like he's learned to negotiate with the world just to exist. Not far from him, a woman pushes a pram with no baby in it, only kindling, a blanket and a chipped teapot. She hums to herself as she walks. When the wheels catch on a stone, she stops, adjusts the teapot like it's an infant, then continues. This is how the city survives, through quiet invention, stubborn dignity, and the small kindnesses that no ledger records. You pass a shop with a display that tries to mimic festivity. There's a wreath in the window made of paper and dyed cloth, and behind it a sign reads holiday specials. Soap, candles, cabbage. 3 men stand outside, arguing over whether it's worth spending their last shillings on a trimmed roast or coal. One votes roast. "You can eat warmth," he says. Another says, "Coal. Warmth keeps the bones from cracking." The third just laughs and buys a single candle, muttering, "Looks like Christmas, smells like tallow." At a street corner near Clerkenwell Green, a group of children have found an old barrel. Someone stuffed newspaper and straw into it and lit it with a match. They gather round it, cheeks glowing, eyes wide, passing between them the end of a broken harmonica. One girl blows a wobbly note and the others laugh. It's not music, but it's theirs. Suddenly one of the boys pulls a string of something from his coat. It's a chain of buttons tied together with twine. "Christmas lights," he announces proudly, stringing them between two posts. The others clap and cheer like it's the greatest invention they've ever seen. You can't help but smile. In this alley of rags and frostbite, a carnival is born out of junk. You stay a while, sharing the warmth, watching the buttons sway in the breeze. The children dance around the barrel like they've just invented celebration from scratch. And maybe they have. They haven't read about royal trees or German ornaments. They've never tasted plum pudding or seen a wax candle on a fir. But here they are, creating a moment that feels like joy, honest, scrappy, and gloriously defiant. As you leave, one of the girls shouts after you, "Don't forget us in your story." She grins, her face smudged with soot, her voice ringing brighter than any bell. And you won't, because this, more than any banquet or ball, is the part of Christmas the history books tend to skip. The part that lives in alleys, in soot-covered laughter, in spoon-warmed hands, in a button garland strung against the dark. This isn't the Christmas that's lost. It's the one no one thought to record. Snow still clings to the city like ash on a dying fire. You head west now, toward the neighbourhoods where the bricks are cleaner, the lamps taller, and the windows glimmer with something approaching elegance. The change is slow but undeniable. Door knockers are polished. Footsteps are softer here, muffled by thick-soled boots and carriage rugs. Even the cold feels gentler, as though privilege has the power to dull the wind. As you round a bend in Belgravia, a soft golden light glows from behind lace curtains. You pause beside a tall iron fence, peering through frost-framed glass into a drawing room that could be a stage set. Inside, a roaring fireplace, polished mahogany, a servant carrying a tray of sugared fruit, and in the centre, yes, there it is. A tree, a real fir, standing proud and candle-lit, its branches weighted with ribbons, oranges, silver chains, and gleaming glass baubles. It looks new, almost uncertain, like the tree isn't quite sure why it's here. Because it is new, at least in England. Word has travelled fast that Queen Victoria and Prince Albert have imported the tradition from Albert's German childhood, decorating a tree in Windsor Castle with candles and handmade ornaments. The illustrated magazines have run engravings of it. Society has taken note, and just like that, a new symbol is born. You watch as two children circle the tree, pointing and gasping at each bauble like it's treasure. They're dressed in velvet and lace, cheeks flushed, not from cold but from too much excitement. Their father looks on from an armchair, mildly amused, brandy glass in hand. Their mother adjusts the ribbon on a branch, lips pursed in concentration. It's all terribly rehearsed, but not unkind. Outside, the snow catches in your collar. You try to imagine explaining this to the girl with the stew pot or the boy curled beside the steam grate. A tree indoors, covered in fire and sugar and silver. It would sound like a dream or a trick, and yet here it is, flickering into reality. Behind glass. You move on, passing house after house, and find that several have copied the idea. Some more modestly, a sprig of holly on the door, or a garland of dried orange slices in the window. Others go all out, hired decorators, gaslit angels, strings of cranberries like red punctuation. For the wealthier classes, a fashion has taken hold, and with fashion comes imitation. At a small publishing house just off Pall Mall, you find the latest issue of the Illustrated London News. The cover is a woodcut of the royal family gathered around their own tree, each child holding a tiny gift. The caption reads, "A German custom adored by the Queen, now warming English hearts." The article inside speaks of sentiment, of hearth and home, of sweet traditions rising like bread in an English oven. But you know better. The oven burns coal. The gifts are stitched in factory rows. The sentiment is real, yes, but it rides on the back of steam, steel, and skillful marketing. Still, you can't deny the power of the image. It tugs at you. It tugs at everyone. You overhear a lamplighter say that his wife wants a tree now, even if it's just a broomstick with apples tied on. She says it'll cheer the children. He shrugs. Can't argue with that. The other lamplighters laugh, but there's warmth in it. The idea is spreading, not because the Queen decrees it, but because it offers something London has lacked for so long, a reason to pause, a symbol of light indoors in the dark heart of winter. That night back near the East End, you find yourself walking past a row of houses where the bricks are cracked, the chimneys chipped and the windows patched with oilcloth. But in one of them, just one, a flicker of something unfamiliar catches your eye. You stop, lean in. It's a tree. Or rather, it's what someone's decided is a tree, a crooked branch jammed into a tin bucket, weighed down with stones. It's been wrapped in red yarn, likely salvaged from an old sweater and dotted with paper ornaments cut from flour sacks and newspapers. A lump of tallow candle burns at the base, flickering wildly but holding steady. 3 children sit on the floor around it, hands outstretched toward the heat, not to warm themselves but to warm the idea. Their mother hums as she stitches a doll's dress by the fire, and their father carves something small and clumsy from a block of wood. It's quiet, but the kind of quiet that holds something sacred, not religious, just gentle, like the whole room has decided to believe in the possibility of peace. You knock softly. The mother answers, surprised but smiling. You ask about the branch. She blushes. Saw it in a picture. Thought I'd try. She nods toward the children. Didn't think it mattered much. Turns out it does. You thank her and step back into the snow, the glow from their window warming your coat for a few steps longer than it should. The Queen's fir has become a poor man's branch, but it means something now. It's growing its own roots right here in the soot and the slush. Elsewhere in the city, shopkeepers have caught on. In the arcade windows near Regent Street you spot whole displays now built around trees, one even featuring a mechanical Santa in a sleigh, his beard made of cotton, his boots painted gold. It's absurd and delightful, and oddly eerie. Children press their noses to the glass. Parents check their coin purses. Everyone wants in. A man selling oranges complains. They're selling pine cones like they're rubies now. Soon they'll charge us to breathe the air. He laughs bitterly, but he's not entirely wrong. The season of imitation has begun, and with it a quiet commerce in joy. You pass a florist hawking sprigs of mistletoe, his sign reading for luck in the new year. A clever marketing trick, but the line outside his stall is real. People will pay for hope, even if it smells like damp leaves and costs a penny they shouldn't spend. At a pub on the corner, a group of chimney sweeps have pooled their wages to buy a roast bird. It's not goose, it's something leaner and less noble, but they cheer anyway. One of them lifts a glass and proclaims, "To the Queen's tree, and to whatever this holiday's becoming." That's the thing about London. Once it adopts a ritual, it chews it up, swallows it, and remakes it in its own image. The palace may have started the trend, but it's the tenements, the alleyways, and the broomstick trees where it begins to matter. By the time you reach your lodging, the snow has covered the footprints of the day. The gas lights burn soft golden puddles against the white. Somewhere behind you, a child laughs. Somewhere ahead, a shopkeeper locks his door and hums the first 2 notes of a carol he doesn't quite remember. And in that space between palace and pauper, tree and branch, something real begins to take root, the kind of Christmas that doesn't need a crown to shine. It's evening now, and the streets have started to hum with a different energy. Not joy, not quite, but movement, a quiet stirring beneath the usual clamour of hoofbeats and factory bells. You follow the sound of something both mechanical and musical, and before long, you find yourself in the shadow of a newspaper office just off Fleet Street, where a crowd has gathered beside a hulking, clattering steam press. Inside, the machine is breathing steam, pumping gears, spinning sheets of paper, spitting them out with a rhythm almost hypnotic. A printer in inky sleeves waves one high above his head. "First issue of the week," he calls. "Holiday edition." The crowd shuffles forward, curious. You take one. The front page bears something you wouldn't have expected 10 years ago. A column of cheerful stories, seasonal poetry, and of all things, a recipe for plum pudding. But what really catches your eye is the bottom corner, a simple black and white rectangle framed in holly. It's a Christmas card, or at least an early attempt at one, printed right into the newspaper. Cut this out and send it to a friend. The words are wrapped around a picture of a family raising glasses. The caption reads, "A happy Christmas to you and yours." It's peculiar. The image is stiff, the face is oddly grim for such a greeting, but the intention is there, and that's what matters. You turn the paper over and realise something else. The card was sponsored. Tiny letters below the image read with compliments of Whitwell's fine soap. You blink. So, this is how the holiday spreads, not just by royal example or whispered song, but by ink and commerce, typeface and timing. Nearby, two boys in capes too big for their shoulders run down the street, clutching stacks of printed cards. A halfpenny each. They shout, "Merry Christmas from your grocer, your landlord, your coal man." You see them slip one under a door, then another through a letter slot. Each one says the same thing, wishing you cheer this season. It's like someone is papering the city with optimism. Forced, maybe, but earnest. You follow the boys for a while, and soon others join them. A girl with red ribbon in her hair sells handmade cards at a corner stand. They're painted with snow-covered cottages, geese, a few oddly unsettling clowns, and one card with a frog riding a bicycle. That makes absolutely no sense, but they sell fast. Inside a tea shop, a young woman writes a dozen cards with ink-stained fingers. She addresses each one carefully, brows furrowed in concentration. You catch the names: co-workers, neighbours, her landlord, the woman from the butcher's. It's not family she's sending cheer to, it's proximity. The people who see her day in and day out. In a city where no one has time, a card becomes the currency of presents. You ask if she's always done this. She smiles. "First year. Got the idea from a shopkeeper who sent one to me. Thought, well, if he can think of me, I can think of them." She seals the envelope with her tongue, pressing it shut like something worth protecting. As you step out from the tea shop, a boy catches your eye, lifting a card toward the lamplight, eyes narrowed. "What's Yuletide supposed to mean?" He throws the question into the air, not really expecting an answer. A man standing nearby gives a shrug. "Means you should try being kinder than you usually are." The boy snorts and slides the card inside his coat. "I guess that's not too bad." And there it is once more, that quiet transformation, not written into law or preached from pulpits, but carried in gestures, in things small enough to slip beneath a door. You make your way toward Cheapside, where the sharp scent of ink dissolves into roasting chestnuts and damp wool. The storefronts here have started competing with something other than prices, with feeling instead. Ribbons drape across bakery windows like festival banners. Butchers tuck sprigs of holly above their doorways. A fishmonger's put out a bowl of oranges with a handwritten note, "Take one if you need it." You can't tell if it's kindness or clever selling, probably some mix of both, but nobody's asking questions. You push through the door of a cramped stationer's tucked between a pawn shop and a barber's chair. The inside smells like hot glue and melting candle wax. A woman wearing wire-rimmed glasses works behind the counter, building stacks of thick cream paper. She stamps each one carefully, her movements quick and deliberate. You ask if she's been selling more than usual. "Can't keep up," she says, without glancing away from her work. "Didn't move a single one last year. Now they're flying off the shelf. Had a gentleman ask if we could print his own portrait on them. Can you picture that?" She stops for a second. "Maybe I'll try it next season." Beside her sits a young boy, probably her son, sketching crooked holly branches onto a card with coloured chalk. The message reads in neat handwriting, "A warm fire and dry boots for you." It's not polished, but it carries more truth than the professionally engraved families with their frozen smiles. On your way back outside, the wind yanks the door open and sends a handful of unsold cards tumbling into the street. A crew of chimney sweeps races after them, laughing, their blackened hands snatching at the fluttering paper. One of them catches his and reads it out loud in a mock-serious tone. "To my dearest companion, may this season leave you well-fed and fondly remembered." The rest of them cheer as he takes a bow. This, you understand now, is how traditions take root, not through legislation or speeches, but through repetition and tiny moments of pleasure. Someone gets a card and feels strangely noticed, acknowledged, so they send one back, and the gesture turns into habit. You walk past a boarding house with its door just barely open, enough to glimpse a hallway hung with string. Cards dangle from it like wet laundry, dozens of them, creased and mismatched, some blotched with ink, others clearly salvaged from last winter. They flutter softly in the draught. There's no order to it, no deliberate arrangement, just a wall of names. A man steps through the door, his hat crooked on his head, and nods toward the display. "Beats wallpaper any day," he says. "At least someone thought to send these." Then he lights his pipe and vanishes into the fog. Later, as you follow the river back, you notice a boatman tacking a card to the wall of his shed. It's already buckling from the damp air, the edges beginning to curl. The image shows a single lantern shining through falling snow. No caption, but he's positioned it just above the doorway, right at eye level, like a prayer. And this is how the thing spreads, this fragile paper custom. Not with trumpets and performances, but with envelopes and strangers brave enough to offer good wishes. The earliest Christmas cards weren't impressive. Some were downright bizarre, featuring dead robins, beetles in little boots, or children crammed inside pudding dishes. But the strangeness didn't kill them. If anything, it made them feel human, because they weren't peddling perfection. They were offering a way to connect, even now as the fog creeps back and the city settles into its grinding rhythm. You can still sense the rustling of paper behind closed doors, wishes passing from palm to palm, thousands of small affirmations that even just briefly, someone remembered someone else. The streets feel louder now, not exactly from happiness, but from something new happening. You wander into a neighbourhood where the air carries the smell of cinnamon, gunpowder and baked sugar. Inside a cramped shop, a man cranks a tin music box that spills out a cheerful melody, while shoppers gather around a strange invention piled high behind him. Christmas crackers, their garish, delicate-looking cylinders wrapped in bright paper and twisted shut at both ends like enormous sweets. They pop open, I'm telling you, the shopkeeper announces proudly, rapping one against the counter. Inside you'll find little toys, riddles, paper crowns, all released with a bang. The Queen's got them up at the palace, and now so can you. You watch a young boy eyeing them nervously, copper coins gripped tight in his sweaty palm. He buys just one, then dashes outside to tear it open. Crack! It snaps like a pistol shot and sends a tin whistle skittering across the slush. He shouts like he's just witnessed sorcery. In a way, he has. Down the street, inside a bakery glowing with firelight and floating sugar, a cook hoists a tray of round, shining puddings onto the counter. Each one is dark and dense with raisins, smelling like nutmeg and molasses. A customer wonders aloud if they're authentic, and the baker laughs. Not a thing authentic about them. My own mother never touched one, but folks read Dickens and now they're demanding them for their tables. You ask if it troubles him. Troubles me? He grins. Only thing that troubles me is I didn't start selling them sooner. He slaps a paper label on one pudding that reads as featured in A Christmas Carol, then gives you a wink. Want yours with extra sentimentality? Outside you spot a tin cart being rolled through the crowd. It's painted red and gold with the words "Penny Treats for the Season" printed across the side. The toys inside are modest, wooden horses, spinning tops, dolls with stitched cloth faces, but they catch the light like jewels. Children press their faces to the glass, negotiating with parents or strangers, anyone holding spare change. One little boy trades a pair of woolen socks for a wind-up bird that flaps in clumsy circles before toppling over. He doesn't mind at all. It's his now, and that's all that counts. You turn a corner and nearly collide with a street show. A man in a patched coat juggles oranges while his partner bangs a tambourine and hurls rhyming insults at passers-by. They're not carolers, they're hustlers with charm. But people around them laugh, toss coins, and briefly forget how cold and broke they are. Everywhere you turn, the season is starting to manufacture joy on a grand scale. Not just ornaments and pudding tins, but emotions turned into products packaged for easy purchase. Childhood now for sale at any corner stall. One cracker, one riddle, one paper crown at a time. You slip into a shop lit by a whale oil lamp hanging from the ceiling. Inside, sagging shelves hold boxes labelled noisemakers and playthings for every deserving child. There are tin drums, toy pistols, puzzles, and even something marked Mechanical Monkey Dancer. Imported. You wind the key, it jerks, shivers and collapses face down onto the floor. The shopkeeper doesn't even blink. That's how it's supposed to work, he says. The children adore it anyway. And here's the strangest part. They genuinely do. The craftsmanship doesn't matter, the polish doesn't matter. It's the ceremony of receiving something, of laughter tucked inside paper, of happiness becoming tangible, a cracker, a toy, a pudding, so it can move from one person to another. It might be loud, it might be cheap, but it's reshaping everything. And once it begins, there's no way to stop it. The streets hum with the sound of tiny explosions, not violence, joy. Crackers are bursting everywhere now. Two boys circle a street lamp, each gripping one end of a red and gold tube until it ruptures with a crack and showers the ground with glitter, ribbon, and a crumpled paper crown. One boy places the crown on his head with complete dignity. "I am the king of pudding," he announces, and nobody disagrees. At a dinner table visible through a steamed-up window, you see an entire family wearing matching hats in pink, yellow, green, eating sausages and mashed potatoes by candlelight. It's not elegant, but it feels celebratory. You imagine they've just pulled crackers, shared terrible jokes, and laughed precisely because the jokes were terrible. And that was the entire point. This isn't tradition inherited from ancestors or carved into history. This is invention, and it's spreading like flour knocked off a shelf. You pass a street vendor shouting over boxes labelled holiday necessities. Each one holds a cracker, a plastic whistle, a joke printed on flimsy blue paper, and a single cube of fruit jelly wrapped in wax. "Happiness in a box," he hollers. "Money back if it doesn't work." The joke, when you peek inside, asks, "What happens when you cross a snowman with a vampire? You turn it over. Frostbite. It's horrible. You laugh despite yourself." Nearby, two factory workers stand outside a fabric shop admiring a small window display, a doll dressed like Queen Victoria gripping a cracker like a royal sceptre. One girl murmurs, "Think we'll ever celebrate Christmas like she does?" Her companion snorts. "You mean with 4 different puddings and a husband who recites poetry?" "Not likely." But then she hesitates. "Still, I've got a hat, and Mum's got matches for lighting the cake." There's something powerful in that sentence, in the way 2 working girls claim the holiday as theirs, not because anyone told them to, but because they've decided they can. You cut through a back alley and find a gang of boys huddled around a candle, attempting to construct their own crackers. One grips a cardboard tube, another stuffs it with shredded paper and match heads, while a third scribbles a joke, Why did the goose cross the road? They argue about the punchline. The boy with the pencil shrugs. Doesn't really matter. It'll still go off. It doesn't go off. It smokes and sputters. They scream with laughter regardless. Elsewhere, in a more refined part of the city, a clockwork shop sells a wind-up angel that circles a metal tree while ringing a tiny bell. It costs what a mill worker makes in a full week, but someone purchases it anyway, carefully wrapped in brown paper and twine. Maybe it'll be opened by candlelight. Maybe it'll stop working after 7 days. Maybe none of that matters, because the holiday isn't about what you own anymore. It's about what you dare to try. You don't need abundance to feel satisfied. You need laughter, commotion, and a shared instant of absurdity. At a pub, a crew of coal haulers take turns wearing the same pink paper crown, raising tin mugs of watery ale in toasts to one another. One of them climbs onto a chair and bellows a joke to the entire room. "What's red?" and travels up and down, he roars. A tomato in an elevator. The crowd groans. Someone hurls a potato. Everybody howls. And just like that, in a space with no tree, no music, and barely enough food, Christmas arrives. Not the royal version, not the expensive version, the made-up version. The kind where a crown costs a penny, a joke costs nothing, and laughter rings louder than cathedral bells. By the time the week ends, the atmosphere above London feels altered. Not exactly lighter, but busier somehow. You walk through Camden in the early morning and catch a hint of something sweet drifting on the cold. Nutmeg, molasses, maybe cinnamon if you focus hard enough. It's not a banquet, but it pretends to be, and the pretending seems to matter. A young girl stands with her mother behind a bakery counter, selling rows of puddings wrapped in cloth. They're uneven and sticky, but the girl beams as she announces, "We steamed these ourselves." It took the whole night. Her mother looks worn out but pleased. "We borrowed coal from the laundry room," she whispers, "but it was worth it." They've already sold 3 before you walk on. At a toy stall further down, tin trumpets gleam in the grey morning light, stacked beside painted spinning tops and puzzles shaped like cats and ships. Most are stamped made in Birmingham, mass-produced and crated by the hundreds. A man picks one up and frowns, looks identical to last year's model. The seller shrugs. Sure does, but it still makes plenty of noise. That's what children care about. And he's not wrong. One block over, you discover a group of kids organising an impromptu parade. They've armed themselves with whatever they could afford, bells, whistles, hollow sticks to bang against the bricks. One child wears a cardboard crown and leads the others through puddles like a commander of a marching band. They create a delightful racket. A bootmaker shouts from an upper window, "Keep it down." But he's grinning. This is something unfamiliar for London. Noise purely for the sake of happiness. Before the city's sounds were industrial, steam hammers, foremen yelling orders. But now laughter is starting to climb up through the gaps, and much of it arrives courtesy of penny toys, small, cheap, mechanical, and enchanting. You pause at a workshop operated by a man who calls himself Mr. Lyle, a self-described toy engineer. He's surrounded by springs, gears, and wooden limbs. You watch him assemble a dancing bear that moves like it's been drinking brandy. "Sold 20 of them last week," he says with a grin. "They break apart in 3 days, but the joy outlasts the toy." That appears to be the hidden truth of all this. The pleasure isn't in how long it lasts. It's in the act of giving, in handing someone a wrapped package and watching their face light up, in turning a key and laughing as a goose wobbles awkwardly across a kitchen table, in discovering wonder just long enough to forget about the soot inside your shoes. You visit a toy warehouse near the waterfront, a massive brick building filled with crates stacked like sugar towers. Inside, children with dirty faces and quick fingers pack whistles and dolls into boxes, working fast and silent. A man shouts from the level below, "Get the drums packed first." The royal shipment leaves tonight. The contradiction isn't lost on anybody. The gifts heading to palaces are assembled by the smallest, coldest hands in the city. You notice one boy slipping a carved button into a box as a prank, a tiny secret he'll never see revealed. He spots you watching and winks. Better than a paper joke, he says, might give some prince a good scare. These toys are basic: tin frogs, wooden soldiers, cloth mice with eyes that don't match. They chirp, rattle, tumble, and shatter. But they also link people who would otherwise never exchange a word. Labourers to nobles, city to countryside, stranger to stranger. And as the barrels roll out toward shops and markets and steam trains headed to every corner of Britain, you recognise something significant. Christmas has become something you can ship. Boxed, portable, tied with ribbon, and ready for 1,000 hearths. And it all fits inside a child's palm. Later that evening, you find yourself in a narrow alley near 7 Dials, drawn by an unusual sound. A steady clicking followed by bursts of laughter. You round the corner and discover a group of children, barefoot, coal-smudged and completely absorbed in racing tin beetles along the lip of a cracked curb. The toys aren't impressive. Most are dented or missing legs. One is just a warped spoon with a cork stuck to it. But the rules are firm, the competition intense, and the cheering louder than you'd expect from kids who haven't eaten dinner. One girl lifts her prize, a hand-sewn pouch filled with marbles. "Best beetle takes it," she announces. No whining if yours tips over. A group of dock workers heading home pause to watch. One man smiles and flips a coin to the winning girl. She catches it without hesitation, bows like a queen, and calls for another round. The men lean against the wall, laughing like they've just recalled something comforting. You continue past a confectioner's cart where sugar mice and peppermint sticks sit in crooked lines. They're not inexpensive, but they're not impossible either. A mother counts out small coins while her children debate which flavours. The vendor wraps each sweet in wax paper as carefully as if it were a gemstone. Just across from there, a toy shop window radiates golden lamplight. Inside sits a mechanical wonder, a miniature stagecoach that winds up and rolls across the display, complete with horses and tiny painted wheels. It's surrounded by a snowy scene, made from cotton and glitter. Children gather outside the glass, their breath fogging the surface. One boy presses both palms to the window and whispers, "Imagine if that were real." His friend shakes his head. "Wouldn't know where to take it anyway." They both laugh. It's not a joke exactly. It's a type of yearning, the kind born in children who understand too clearly that their joy must squeeze into small, affordable forms. You step into the shop and observe the owner arranging merchandise behind the counter. He shows you a set of clockwork birds, each producing a different note. They don't sing particularly well, he admits, but they chirp just enough. He smiles. You don't need complete melodies at Christmas, just a little sound in the right spot. Outside, the crowds grow thicker. A man in a tall hat plays a hurdy-gurdy, its crank spinning out wheezy carols while his daughter dances with ribbons in her hands. She's no taller than his kneecap, but she twirls with the absolute confidence of a theatrical star. A box lies open for donations. Some people give, some don't. She dances regardless. Above them, in a window framed by frost, a small boy sits by himself, holding a jack in the box. He cranks it once, twice, waits. It springs open, he jumps, then he laughs. Alone but not lonely. The toy's sufficient. And maybe that's what makes this version of Christmas so strange. It doesn't chase perfection. It accepts chipped paint and crooked limbs, off-key melodies and jokes that barely land. It's a celebration stitched together by factory rejects and penny wishes. But it functions, because in a city built on routine and soot and hardship, even the smallest surprise, a spring-loaded frog, a spinning top, a cracker that explodes with a paper crown and a bad pun can create genuine wonder. The toys don't endure, they're not designed to, but their memory persists, tucked into drawers, retold in stories or handed down to the next child waiting. And in that gesture, passing joy from one small hand to another, Christmas starts to feel less like something invented and more like a tradition that was always there, waiting to be remembered. The snow has mostly disappeared now, leaving behind slippery cobblestones and puddles filled with soot. But something else remains in the air, a hum that's almost musical, though no actual tune is playing. You follow it through a tangle of side streets until you arrive at a narrow churchyard, gates standing open, ground uneven with frost-pushed stones. There, a small group of people have gathered, not inside pews or for a service, but outside, coats buttoned to their throats, breath clouding as they sing. No hymnals, no banners, just voices, untrained and imperfect, rising and falling like chimney smoke. They're singing old songs, but not the kind from churches. These are folk melodies, ancient things half forgotten and pieced back together. Songs about holly and ivy, robins in snow, lovers waiting through winter. You don't recognise all the words, but the sound pulls at something familiar. A woman standing near you whispers, "It's a collection group." They travel from town to town, writing down old songs before they disappear. You glance at the man scribbling furiously in a notebook, his pencil dark from rain. Another woman nearby adds, "He says these were never intended for choirs. They belong in kitchens, fields, beside fires." That makes perfect sense. The music isn't grand. It's cosy, rough-edged, but with a rhythm that matches walking speed, stirring speed, sewing speed. These aren't carols meant for stages. They're songs to live alongside. Later you follow one of the singers through a winding market lane. She's humming something quietly under her breath, carrying a basket of bread. When you ask about the melody, she smiles. "My grandmother sang it. I thought it was a lullaby. Turns out it's a wassail song." She shrugs. What's the real difference? You pass a row of shops where the doors have been propped open, not for business but for sound. A butcher whistles a carol while sharpening his knives. A seamstress hums while fitting a dress. Even a street sweeper taps his broom to the rhythm of some invisible beat. These aren't performance halls, they're workspaces. And yet music has returned to the city, not forced or commanded, but slipping in through the cracks. You find a carpenter in Whitechapel sanding a railing while a girl nearby plays a penny whistle. She's off-key, out of breath, and glowing. He doesn't stop her. "Better than coughing," he mutters, smiling. Later, a group of coal haulers sit outside a tavern, passing around a bottle and singing in harmony. Their voices are deep, rough, filled with laughter. The lyrics are ridiculous, something about pigs wearing waistcoats. But the sound is warm and honest. One man belts a final note so loudly that a pigeon tumbles from a windowsill overhead and flutters away in protest. Everyone roars. Not far from there, in an alley where icicles hang like daggers from the roofline, a small choir of children sings for pennies. They've dressed themselves in old curtains and hats with pine twigs poked through. Their cheeks are flushed, their pitch uncertain, their harmony delicate. But when they sing the final line of "Here we come a-wassailing," even the grocer standing in the doorway wipes his eye. You ask the oldest girl where she learned the words. Don't know, she shrugs. They just feel like winter. That's the honest truth. The songs aren't always understood, but they belong to the season. You keep walking, the echo of unfinished carols trailing behind like smoke from chimneys. At first, the melodies seem random, fragments from old ballads, folk tunes twisted by time. But as the hours stretch on, a strange pattern starts to show itself. In nearly every neighbourhood, someone's humming. Not the same song, but the same impulse. From Chelsea to Shoreditch, Brixton to Bethnal Green, voices lift in cold kitchens and bounce off cobblestones. And most of them aren't singing for attention. They're singing because somehow it makes the winter feel less infinite. You pass a laundress rinsing sheets in murky water, murmuring a song you can't identify. Something about cattle lowing and a cradle in hay. You pass a tailor's apprentice tapping his scissors in time, with a rhythm only he can hear. You pass a one-legged soldier outside a workhouse, singing not for coins but because his voice is the only part of him still standing upright. There's something strikingly honest about these songs. They're messy, off-key, too loud or barely audible, but they connect, not just the wealthy and the poor, but the past and the present. A song you hear on Fleet Street was probably hummed in a Dorset barn 50 years back. Another, barely more than a chant about pudding and ale, feels like it survived by accident, passed along by mouths too stubborn to let it die. You stop at a bookseller's stall near Holborn, where a pile of chapbooks lies spread out like playing cards. One catches your attention. Carols gathered by hand, rural songs of winter. Inside are lyrics written in uneven handwriting, often with no melody, sometimes with notes like, sung to the tune of an Irish drinking song. You flip to one that begins, bring us in no brown bread, bring us in no white, and ends with, but bring us in good ale. The chorus is nothing but hand clapping. The bookseller chuckles. I'd bet they sang that one in fields, not churches. Elsewhere, in a train station waiting room, you hear a boy singing softly to his sister. His voice is breaking, the tune fragile, but she listens like it's the most beautiful thing in the world. When he finishes, she claps gently and says, again. He nods. Outside, even the cab horses seem caught in the moment, hooves clicking against the street in time with a waltz played by a blind man on his concertina. The music swirls around your boots as you walk. You pass a hat shop where the apprentices are whistling while trimming felt. One of them pauses mid-verse and says, these songs, they're old as bones, but we sing them like they belong to us. And that's the thing. They do belong to them now. These carols, these tunes, once nearly lost in the roar of smokestacks and sermons, are finding fresh life in parlours, pubs, and the spaces in between. You pause beneath a bridge as a group of canal workers pass by, singing something rowdy and borderline vulgar about figgy pudding. A few onlookers shake their heads, but nobody tells them to stop. It's winter after all. People are allowed to make some noise. You stand still for a long moment, letting the voices fade into the timber and darkness. You realise you've stopped noticing where the songs are coming from. They simply exist now. They've become part of the city's fabric, neither holy nor flawless, but living, and perhaps that's sufficient. Twilight approaches when you notice him, a stocky figure wrapped in a heavy emerald cloak edged with fur, crowned with holly, gripping a walking stick carved into a grinning face. He stands before a pie shop distributing roasted chestnuts, his laughter booming so powerfully it sends a pigeon tumbling from its windowsill perch. Children gawk, grown-ups smile. Some keep their distance, uncertain whether he's a costumed vagrant or an actor who wandered off. He identifies himself as Father Christmas. Not Santa Claus, not St. Nicholas, simply Father Christmas. And he resembles nothing like the cheerful red-robed character you'll eventually recognise in coming years. This iteration is more ancient, more grounded, less concerned with reindeer and more focused on celebration. He carries the scent of cider and cured meat. His boots are mud-caked, his fingertips are marked with walnut ink, and his laughter sounds like melodies sung beside flickering flames. You inquire about his origins, and he answers, the forest, naturally. Then he winks, though recently the markets. That's not completely inaccurate. For generations, Father Christmas represented winter generosity, not presents, but merriment, sustenance, and spirits. A towering figure in emerald, who might appear at your threshold during the shortest days and insist you serve him ale and prepare an additional bird. Though recently he's been shifting, or rather being shifted. You enter a printing house and browse the newest seasonal publications. Some continue depicting Father Christmas in emerald garments, encircled by ivy and playfulness. Others have started portraying him thinner, grinning more gently, travelling by sleigh. One leaflet labels him the essence of the season. Another more daringly identifies him as the bringer of gifts. The metamorphosis is gradual, yet present. He's abandoning his primal roughness, his dirt-covered boots and beer-soaked humour, and transforming into something fresher, tidier, softer, and perhaps most significantly, marketable. Beyond a toy merchant you encounter him once more, only now he's constructed from timber. Positioned in the display, coloured crimson with ivory accents, he clutches a bundle over one shoulder and beams with the gentle, expressionless look of something shaped by consensus. Beside him stands a placard, Santa Claus endorsed, and beneath that, brought from America, you squint. So that's the source, the title, the crimson garment, the sleigh drawn by caribou. It's been travelling across the ocean on vessels loaded with fabric, volumes and sweetener. You recall overhearing it mentioned in drinking establishments. The Dutch named him Sinterklaas, the Americans transformed him into Santa, and now he's arrived, greeting Father Christmas and gradually replacing him, though presently both coexist, sometimes even simultaneously. You observe one youngster holding a card displaying the traditional emerald-clad man clutching a vessel of rose-coloured beverage, and another with an illustration of a crimson-suited character distributing playthings. Neither youngster appears puzzled, they simply grin. It's a fusion of imagery, a combination of legends, and London, forever pragmatic, is embracing whichever interpretation moves the most confections. Still in a secluded passage, you discover something distinctive, a chalk illustration on a barrier. It depicts a character in mismatched garments, towering and cheerful, with celestial bodies on his mantle and frozen crystals for vision. No title, no trademark, simply a statement. He delivers comfort, and perhaps that's the sole thing that counts. You travel east toward the docks, where the passages grow tighter and the grime denser. Throughout the journey, the numerous versions of Father Christmas emerge repeatedly on advertisements, in card merchant displays, decorated on containers of inexpensive ale, and none of them correspond. Some display crowns of ivy, others crimson coverings. Some hold bundles, some lift chalices. One painting even depicts him performing the violin with a rodent in a vest, applauding nearby. The city hasn't selected an interpretation yet. It's still testing, still mixing folklore and style, printing happiness on whatever material accepts pigment. Beyond a print booth in Spitalfields, you encounter a woman named Edna, offering hand-tinted cards. She displays one she illustrated personally. "This one's my preferred," she declares, radiating. It depicts an elderly man with a bent staff, guiding a cluster of youngsters into the forest. They're cackling. One grasps a lamp. "He's not Santa," she mentions. "He's simply winter," the pleasant aspect. You inquire whether people purchase many similar ones. "Not anymore," she responds. They prefer rosy cheeks now, rounded middles. Simpler to trust a grin than an enigma. She's not resentful, merely watchful. You depart Edna's booth and proceed onward, threading through sections of London where the celebration hasn't entirely arrived yet. Avenues where Christmas still signifies one additional flame, perhaps two additional tubers, and a heated rock bundled in cloth to clutch throughout the darkness. And still, even here he emerges. You spot him, drawn with chalk on a school building barrier, this instance with caribou sketched alongside him, poorly scaled but brimming with energy. The youngsters who illustrated him used varying shades of chalk for the mantle. Half emerald, half crimson, as though they couldn't determine which interpretation to trust. In a seamstress's establishment, a patron requests a crimson-trimmed jacket for his son, identical to the one Santa displays. The seamstress pauses. "That's not what he displayed when I was young, though she creates it regardless." The boy radiates before the glass. That's everything that counts. At the postal facility, containers labelled Lapland Rest, prepared for transport. Correspondence to a man nobody has witnessed, yet whom everyone appears to believe. You lift one up, nameless, composed in graphite. It merely states, "Please assist my mother. She claims we're acceptable, though I understand she weeps while I rest." You replace it. Not every youngster desires playthings. Some simply desire the concept of someone present, someone who might deliver comfort, if not wonders. As darkness descends, you locate yourself near Hyde Park, where vehicles align the avenue and the more prosperous households take evening walks to display their winter garments. A young woman in silk raises her skirts to evade the puddles, cackling behind her gloves. Her sibling presents her a paper crown from a cracker. She refuses. "It's for youngsters," she mentions, though he places it into her cap regardless, and they both cackle. Across the park, a cluster of abandoned children press against the barriers, observing. They're not cackling. They lack crackers. They lack garments, though one of them extracts a fragment of fabric from his pocket and drapes it around the others like an enchanted cape. "Now you're the monarch," he declares, "and I'm the dessert bandit." They commence playing. Behind them on the barrier, someone has scrawled a statement in charcoal. He observes you when you're resting. It's half a caution, half a vow. Father Christmas, or Santa, or whoever he's becoming, has adopted numerous forms, though in all of them there's one thread. Vigilance. Not for mischief, for necessity. And gradually the city starts to mirror that, not merely with playthings and cards, though with expressions, with offerings of comfort, with cackling shared between outsiders. And in every merchant display his grin observes back. London, for all its granite and grime, is a city constructed for darkness, and on this specific December evening those shadows appear to extend a little farther, attach a little firmer to the corners of panes and the edges of gas lamps. The breeze whistles through the passages like an ancient melody performed poorly, and the mist carries with it a distinctive atmosphere, agitated, vigilant, almost anticipating. You locate yourself near the boundary of Islington, where the dwellings are compressed together and the parish chimneys constantly exhaling. Though for once the smoke isn't merely coal, it's candle wax and roasting bulbs and something faintly sugary. People are getting comfortable. It's Christmas Eve, and that signifies one narrative time. You slip into a boarding establishment illuminated from interior. It's nothing extraordinary. Flaking wallpaper, fractured ceiling, an elderly canine asleep beside the hearth. Though tonight there's a flame going, and before it a woman in a mended shawl narrates a tale to a semicircle of youngsters sitting cross-legged in unmatched stockings. Her voice is subdued, whispered, as though it's portion of the flame. She's weaving a narrative about a wandering man who raps on thresholds during the coldest darkness of the year. If you welcome him inside, she mentions, he delivers comfort and abandons coins in your footwear. Though if you reject him, your hearth grows frigid for a month. The youngsters gasp. One clutches a slipper as though it's suddenly precious. Another inquires, "Is he genuine?" The woman grins, her face creased though compassionate. "He's genuine sufficient, if you trust in visitors." Beyond in the avenue a cluster of boys huddle beneath a threshold, not entirely concealing, not entirely prepared to return home. One grasps a candle remnant, another possesses a bundle with a chime tied to the conclusion. "What if we narrate phantom stories tonight?" one whispers as they formerly did. You halt. "Phantom stories on Christmas Eve?" Affirmative. That's the portion nobody reveals anymore. In the Victorian age, the darkness before Christmas wasn't merely for happiness and dessert, it was for phantoms. Not the variety that rattle bonds and groan, though the silent sort, the ones that slip into chambers undetected, the ones that travel the rear of recollection. You slip into a drinking establishment where the flames burn dimmer than typical, and the discussion leans toward whispers. A man with a crimson nose leans adjacent to his associates and commences a tale about a vehicle that rolls past his residence every Christmas Eve at midnight, though with no horses, no operator, merely the creak of wheels. Another woman contributes her narrative about the rap at the threshold that arrives every year, constantly at the identical hour, though nobody's ever present. These aren't phantom stories to frighten, they're phantom stories to unite, to remind people of the past, of what remains, of who they've lost. You discover more of them as the darkness intensifies. In one dwelling, a household sits around a flame narrating stories of an uncle who disappeared during a blizzard and whose boots still creak on the stairs each December. In another, a boy declares he dreams of a lady in an ivory dress who stands at the base of his bed and performs a melody nobody else recognizes. Even in the superior homes, the drawing chambers flicker with strange tales. Not everyone trusts them, though everyone listens. And that's the purpose, because Christmas Eve in this city is when the curtain between then and now grows delicate. It's not merely about presents, it's about presence of recollection, of voices, of footsteps long vanished. You step outside into the avenue again, and everything feels slower, gentler. The gaslight curves as though it's captured in a dream, and every pane glows with the golden hush of people remembering things they didn't realize they'd forgotten. It's not haunting, it's reassuring. The past is still here. You merely have to remain still sufficient to hear it rap. You continue walking, your boots muffled by a delicate sheet of snow that's returned overnight, coating London in a hush. And though the city is never truly silent tonight, it feels as though it's holding its breath, waiting for something, perhaps even someone. A flickering pane near Clerkenwell draws your attention. You peer inside and observe 3 generations gathered around a hearth. The younger sits cross-legged with a biscuit in one hand and wide vision fixed on an elderly man with wild eyebrows and a coal-scarred hand. He's halfway through a tale, something about a coal cart that rolled uphill one Christmas Eve, drawn by no horse, guided by a lamp that flickered azure. The youngster interrupts. Was it a phantom? The elderly man smirks. It was a recollection, displaying boots. You don't remain long, though the words pursue you. Beyond, you spot a woman arranging apples and gingerbread on a plate. Not for herself, not even for her youngsters. It's for the visitor, she declares, with a shrug when her neighbour teases her, merely in case. The neighbour rotates her vision. Though that darkness, she abandons a heel of bread and a thimble of ale also, merely in case. Because here's the silent truth of Christmas Eve. In the Victorian age, phantoms weren't feared. They were welcomed. The narratives told weren't meant to terrify, though to remember. To speak aloud, the titles no longer spoken. To abandon space at the table where someone formerly sat. To make peace with the concept that the past doesn't genuinely depart, it merely quiets. In one bakery, the flower-covered apprentice narrates his master that he once observed his grandfather sitting in the corner of the establishment on Christmas. Christmas Eve, long after the man had passed. Didn't declare nothing, he contributes, brushing sweetener from his hands. Merely nodded, as though he was checking the work. In a boarding establishment attic, a girl swears her mother hums a lullaby every Christmas Eve from the adjacent chamber. Her roommate reminds her mother died 3 winters ago. The girl only grins, still recognizes the tune. None of these moments are powerful. They're barely detected. Like a floorboard that creaks at the correct moment, or a draft that carries a scent nobody else detects. Though for those who wait, who listen, who trust merely a little more after midnight, they're genuine. You visit a lamplighter's shelter merely before he makes his final round. He sits hunched over a vessel, staring into the flame. When you inquire if he's acceptable, he declares, every year around this period, I feel someone walk in behind me. Never look rear, though. That's the trick. Then he grabs his pole and disappears into the dark. Even the postboys delivering late darkness cards move with a strange reverence. They whistle subdued tunes, glance up at empty panes and speak in half voices. They won't admit they're spooked, though they're not rushing either. At the river's boundary, you discover a man in a long jacket tossing breadcrumbs into the water. When you inquire why, he declares, "For my sibling. He formerly did it on Christmas Eve. Figured someone should carry on." You inquire how long it's been. He shrugs. Decades, then grins, though he still deserves a breadcrumb. There's no title for this variety of ritual. It's not sacred, it's not composed, though it counts. Because in this fresh interpretation of Christmas, constructed from crackers and cards and desserts and penny playthings, the past still insists on being welcomed, not as a burden, though as a companion. And as the clock nears midnight, you feel it too. Not fear, not sorrow, merely the sense that you're not walking alone, that every snow-covered threshold holds a recollection, that every flickering flame might be warming someone you cannot observe. And somehow that's the most reassuring portion of all. It's Christmas morning now. The illumination is pale, though gentle, and for once London wakes gently, not with the shriek of factory whistles or the clatter of milk carts, though with something quieter, the creak of floorboards, the clink of teacups, the rustle of paper wrapping being carefully unwrapped, then re-wrapped merely in case it requires to be utilised again next year. You walk through Kensington, where the dwellings rise in elegant rows, their panes lined with lace. Through the glass you glimpse a grand dining chamber, the table arranged with such precision it almost resembles a painting. Polished silver glints beside bone china. Sprigs of holly lie across each napkin. A roast goose, glazed golden, nearly glowing, waits at the centre like a crown jewel. At one conclusion of the table, a boy in a velvet jacket fidgets while a governor straightens his collar. At the other, a woman whispers to a maid, checking the arrangement of fig preserves. The father reads from a newspaper, not looking up. The flame crackles. Everything is in order. You move on past the servants' entrance, around the rear, where a smaller threshold creaks open and a kitchen maid steps outside, fanning herself with a sooty apron. Her cheeks are flushed, her sleeves rolled, and a faint smear of flour dusts her chin. She ignites a quick cigarette and leans against the barrier. When she observes you, she smirks. 6 courses, she mutters, all for people who will consume half and converse through the remainder. Inside, the kitchen is its own realm, steam rising from pots, copper pans clanging, orders barked and echoed. A scullery boy sneaks a spoonful of something and nearly loses a finger. The cook, crimson-faced and glorious, stirs a dessert as though he's conducting an orchestra. There's cackling down here. Exhaustion, too. Affirmative, though a variety of chaos that feels alive. Unlike the stiff grace of the dining chamber above, this celebration has motion. One maid extracts a cracker with the delivery boy and shrieks when it explodes. A paper crown lands in the butter. Someone breaks into a verse of the roast beef of Old England before being shushed and giggled into silence. Rear on the avenue, you pass a cart carrying containers of wine and a string of geese hanging by their feet. The operator snaps the reins with the glee of someone who recognises today will be profitable. Better hurry, he calls to nobody. The prosperous are still hungry. In a townhouse, 2 blocks away, you glimpse another variety of feast, smaller, more private. A widow sits alone at a lace-covered table, stirring her tea with careful grace. Beside her, 2 places are arranged, though untouched. On the 3rd plate a single mince pie, neatly halved. She raises her glass in silence, then sips. It's a distinctive variety of feast, one constructed not of abundance, though of recollection. You travel east, and the dwellings change, barriers closer together, stoops narrower. Though here too, the scent of roasting fills the atmosphere. Not goose, though beef bones and bulbs stewing gradually in pots. A man in shirt sleeves leans outside a pane and shouts across the way, "Oi, Mrs. Lang, that turkey I detect." She shouts rear, "Dream on, it's turnip and lies." They both cackle. And here's where things get complicated, because while the upper avenues are brimming with tradition, polished to perfection, the lower avenues are brimming with something else. Invention. You walk past a household crammed around a table too small, carving a roast tuber as though it's fine duck. The father raises a chipped vessel and declares, "To everything we nearly forgot." Everyone cheers. Someone ignites a remnant of flame, and somehow, in that flickering moment, it feels equally as grand as the table in Kensington. Farther down the avenue, the scene shifts again. You locate yourself in a converted stable, now dwelling to 3 households sharing what space they can. In the corner, 2 women take turns flipping a makeshift dessert over an open flame, a muslin-wrapped sphere of flour, dried fruit, and whatever sweetener they could afford. One of the youngsters peers at it eagerly. "Will there be a 6pence inside?" he inquires. The elderly woman cackles, "Only if the fairies dropped one in when I wasn't looking." She winks, then contributes, "Though if you discover it, you owe me your washing up." They don't possess sufficient chairs for everyone, so containers are transformed into stools, a crate becomes a table, and a broken pane is plugged with a scarf. Though the grins arrive easily. Cackling doesn't care about furniture. Someone performs a melody off-key, powerful, joyous. The dessert finally arrives off the flame, steaming dense, slightly lopsided. It's not beautiful, though it disappears within minutes. And here you realise something strange. Despite the fractured plates and second-hand cutlery, these tables feel more alive than the polished ones. Uptown, the flames flicker more freely. The paper crowns are torn and crooked, though displayed with pride. The humour from the crackers, terrible as they are, still earn belly cackles. In one corner, a grandfather narrates a narrative about the first Christmas dessert he ever tasted. It possessed a burnt crust and a bone in it, he declares. "We thought the bone was fortunate." He halts, then contributes. Turned out it was from the canine's vessel. Everyone roars beyond. The sound, footsteps, crunching frost, marks a fresh arrival. A neighbour from down the road carries in a tray with 3 meat pies. She shrugs. "We added extras." She didn't, though it doesn't count. The pies are split 6 ways, and someone toasts her with a fractured teacup. This is what a shared feast resembles. Not elegant, not abundant, though stitched together from generosity and stubborn happiness. Rear in the city centre, the big hotels are hosting elaborate meals. Silver domes raised to reveal glistening birds. Servants in gloves pouring gravy from porcelain boats. The guests sit upright. Napkins crisp grins. Polite toasts are constructed. The clink of crystal is perfect, practiced. And still, as you pass by one of those towering panes, you detect a boy beyond, observing the diners. He doesn't appear jealous, merely curious. He's consuming a roll of bread stuffed with something spicy and steaming. A gift, perhaps, from someone who remembered. He observes for a moment farther, then transforms and skips rear toward the passages where a cluster of other youngsters are constructing a snowman with buttons, ash, and a cap constructed from an elderly boot. They're cackling like monarchs. One girl performs a melody about dessert and paper caps. The words don't rhyme, the tune doesn't exist. It's fresh, invented on the spot, though it's theirs. And that's what strikes you most, how every table in London is celebrating something slightly distinctive. In Belgravia, it's precision. In the East End, it's defiance. In the kitchens below stairs, it's survival. In the stables and cellars and single-chamber dwellings, it's invention. Not everyone possesses a goose. Not everyone possesses a tree. Not everyone even possesses footwear. Though across all of them, from the velvet feasts to the turnip banquets, one truth holds. You don't require abundance to create tradition. You merely require sufficient comfort to share. And this year at last, that comfort is everywhere. As the morning fades into afternoon, you drift farther east, where the structures sag, the gutters run black, and the avenues are quieter. Not because they're peaceful, though because not much occurs here except today. Today, you locate yourself at the barriers of the workhouse. Iron bars, brick barriers. A place constructed to sort the desperate from the dangerous, the idle from the deserving. And still, even here where most celebrations are marked only by smaller portions and harder beds, something strange is occurring. A woman with a clipboard stands at the barrier, frowning as a delivery boy unloads a cart of tubers, bulbs and weight 2 small geese. Not sufficient to feed the whole structure, though sufficient for a symbolic gesture, courtesy of a local benefactor, she declares without conviction. Anonymous, naturally. Inside, the ward matron walks briskly, barking instructions to the cook. No brandy in the dessert, don't tempt them, and maintain the skins on the tubers. Peels are nutritious, though behind her rear someone slips a knob of butter into the pot. Another sneaks in a pinch of cloves. In the youngster's wing, a low table is laid with enamel vessels and rough bread. It doesn't appear festive until a boy extracts something from his pocket. A crumpled card clearly utilised before, folded and faded. On the front is a sketch of a robin. He props it up against a spoon. The others gather around it as though it's a centrepiece. One girl reaches beneath the table and extracts a cracker. Merely one. Discovered it behind the pantry threshold, she whispers. They take turns grasping it, uncertain whether to extract it at all. Finally they do. It pops quietly and spills outside a rose paper crown and a humour too smudged to read. The boy who displayed the crown last year insists it still fits him best. A scuffle breaks outside, then cackling. You move through the corridors. In one chamber, a volunteer reads a narrative about a rodent who discovers a peppermint stick and shares it with a shivering fox. In another, a nurse hands outside oranges, genuine oranges, speckled and slightly bruised. The residents cradle them like glass. Not everyone joins in. Some of the elderly sit in silence, their vision fixed on the pain, observing the snow descend in gradual, uncertain flakes. One man mutters, "Not worth a fuss." Frigid is frigid, dessert or no dessert. Though a woman beside him nudges his arm and slips half her portion onto his plate without declaring a word. You halt at the infirmary, where one of the attendants has arranged 3 flames on a bedside table. Nobody's allowed open flames in here, though she's placed them in jam jars and nobody complains. She hums while she works, some ancient melody that could be a lullaby or a forgotten carol. Beyond the kitchen, a cluster of volunteers from the middle-class parish arrive with a hamper inside. Apples, biscuits, knitted scarves. One man reads a list aloud, as though he's afraid of sounding too compassionate. Though the youngsters don't care. They grab at the parcels with nervous delight. One girl grasps up a crimson mitten and radiates as though it's been spun from gold. A boy leans over and whispers, "We don't typically receive mittens or oranges or melodies." You inquire him why today is distinctive. He shrugs. They declared it's Christmas. Perhaps that signifies something now. And in this place where everything has constantly been earned, tracked and measured, that sentence feels like a revolution. You depart the youngster's wing and wander deeper into the workhouse, where the illumination dims and the barriers narrow. This is where the elderly men rest, labourers worn down to shadows, shoulders hunched from years of hauling, constructing, bending. In one corner, a man is polishing his boots with a cloth so delicate it's nearly transparent. Not because anyone will observe them, merely because it's what he formerly did on Christmas morning, rear when there was someone waiting at the table, and steam on the pane and a feline winding between his legs. Across the hall, 2 men perform dominoes with pieces carved from bone. One mutters, "Formerly I'd receive a bottle today. Not a quality bottle, mind, merely one that stung less going down." The other snorts, be glad you received teeth abandoned to chew the biscuit. Still they perform on, gradually, steadily, as though ritual counts more than reward. In the dining chamber the cook has performed her best. The tubers are watery though hot, the meat is delicate though tender, the dessert jiggles as it should. There's even a ladle of custard thinned to stretching purpose. When she slaps a spoonful onto each tin plate, she contributes a wink as though it's portion of the flavour, and something remarkable occurs. Nobody complains. One man, fresh to the workhouse, still with the calluses of someone recently useful, stands up and presents a toast with his chipped cup of weak tea to the people beyond who remember we exist. He sits quickly, embarrassed, though several men raise their cups regardless. One whispers, "First toast I've heard in 10 years." After the meal, someone starts to perform. It's not a carol, more of a pub melody, something about a sailor and a chicken that received loose in a cathedral. Though the chorus is powerful and the applauding maintains period. The woman who slipped butter into the stew earlier taps her foot to the beat, smirking. You step beyond for atmosphere. Snow is descending again, this period finer, more confident. Across the yard, a cluster of youngsters are constructing a snowman, utilising borrowed mittens and an elderly boot. A single paper crown, flattened from too numerous heads, rests on its slushy brow. And then you hear it, chimes, not from a parish or a stagecoach, though from a pushcart wobbling down the road. Atop it stands a man in a moth-consumed jacket with a cowbell in each hand. Who desires a wonder, he cries. First one's complimentary. The youngsters squeal. Even the elderly residents peek through the panes, curiosity outlasting weariness. The man commences handing out side trinkets. A thimble here, a carved button present, a paper fragment with a humour composed in violet ink. None of it useful, all of it priceless. When he's performed, he tips his battered cap. That's it for this year. You'll have to be extra melancholy next period if you desire something superior. He winks. The snowman receives a second crown. Inside, the flame burns low though steady. One woman sits with her knitting, constructing something crimson and woolly without a clear form. Perhaps a scarf, she declares, or perhaps merely something comfort appearing. And that's the heart of it. In a structure designed to strip celebration from those with empty pockets, folks are taking back their claim to happiness, not through earning it, but from pure necessity. A child, wearing a single glove, face still sticky with dessert, gazes upward and wonders, will Christmas come around again next year? You hesitate for a moment. Then you give a nod. If you hold on to the memory, it will. His smile suggests that's the finest promise anyone's ever made him. When afternoon arrives, the sun hangs reluctant and low, painting the rooftop edges in dusty gold. Snow continues its descent, now tumbling in unhurried spirals, gathering on gutters and dampening the clatter of hooves and wagon wheels against stone streets. You wander westward once more, where homes stretch taller, hats gleam brighter, and drapes hang heavier. Within one of these well-furnished residences, something's taking shape, though not in the sitting room. It's happening in the drawing room, where a circle of women sit with teacups planning Christmas's very future. This gathering isn't meant for idle chatter. It's a committee clothed in silk and wool, armed with notebooks and eyeglasses, creased foreheads and ink-marked hands. They're arguing intensely over next year's charity campaign. Not merely soup this round, declares a lanky woman dressed in wine red. Folks need outerwear, footwear, self-respect. Outerwear costs money, another sniffs. Not nearly as much as youngsters. Dying from cold, a third woman fires back, straightening her spectacles. They're the earnest fighters of genteel parlours, benefactors with resources, hours, and the drive to deploy both. Yet even among them you catch something curious. This transcends mere obligation. It isn't even rooted in shame. It's about forward motion. Once a Christmas custom takes root, even one dreamed up last Tuesday, it possesses an odd persistence. One woman notes how the royal household's tree last season sparked universal desire for the same. Another mentions the avalanche of mail her letter carrier struggled with, children's requests mostly sent to Father Christmas without proper postage. She keeps one tucked in her purse, worn and folded. It's scrawled in lead-on scrap and says, "Dear Sir, I wish for a book, an actual one without missing pages." Her voice catches slightly as she reads it aloud. "We have to improve." They all murmur agreement. You retreat outside and meander along these upscale residential rows. At multiple addresses, musicians have been summoned to perform in entrance halls and front parlours. Harp players, violin players, even vocalists. One quartet delivers a somewhat off-key rendition of The Holly and the Ivy, while a guest beside the port sherry mutters to his companion, "They'll grace Covent Garden come spring." Round the bend, another singing group moves house to house, though not seeking payment. These are local youngsters, some drowning in oversized coats, others squeezed into undersized shoes, singing for pleasure, for treats, for custom. They position themselves beneath a gas lamp that wavers uncertainly in the breeze, belting lyrics with greater passion than precision. And when they finish Good King Wenceslas, a woman leans from her window and releases a bundled loaf downward, still radiating warmth. She shouts. The children disperse, shrieking and tossing the package among themselves like the treasure it represents. But not every residence opens its shutters. One gentleman on a balcony bellows, "It's not Christmas if silence still exists." The children respond with unified booing, then launch into an even louder verse, and you understand Christmas has begun seeping beyond parlours into public streets, escaping hymn books into narrow passages. It's no longer merely practised by the wealthy or suffered through by the destitute. It's being reimagined, not through legislation or preaching, but through bread, joy, hand coverings and paper headpieces. And like every enduring tale, nobody can pinpoint who penned the opening line. Down the block further, you halt at a dwelling with no singing, no merriment, just the gentle rhythm of typewriter keys. Tap, tap, ding, tap, tap, ding. Within, a figure hunches over his workspace, spectacles sliding downward, ink staining his sleeves. He's composing something unusual, not correspondence, not documentation, but a narrative, one situated during Christmas, though the space smells more of ink and coal residue than roasted nuts and spice. He pauses, reviews a line. Even the most impoverished soul may celebrate, if only through recollection. Then he exhales, strikes it through, and begins fresh. This isn't Charles Dickens, not on this occasion, but it could be throughout London. Authors, established ones, ambitious ones, struggling ones, are now employing Christmas as backdrop, metaphor, or resolution. And why wouldn't they? The season brims with paradox, destitution and luxury, delight and sorrow, optimism and frozen extremities. A woman 2 levels above composes verse about a snowflake landing in a widow's tea and rekindling her will to exist. A printer's helper in Soho sketches a cartoon depicting a Christmas pudding detonating in a clergyman's face. A former chimney climber, now barely literate, begins a journal entry. Today I witnessed a wealthy gentleman donate his gloves to a dog. Throughout the city, Christmas is transforming into the medium for reinvention, not merely of identity, but of narrative. Even the press is taking notice. This morning's front page still featured politics and grain scarcity, but on the 4th page, a section titled Peculiar Christmas Observations. Today, 3 chimney sweeps were spotted carolling in Wapping, adorned in curtains with a roasted beet perched on a borrowed platter. Observers claim they performed Silent Night in harmony before consuming the beet and taking a bow. One proclaimed himself monarch of the fractured teapots. No charges filed, you can't suppress a smile. The world might be segregated by status, by masonry barriers, by flatware, but absurdity penetrates every fissure. You veer into a tighter passageway now, where the aroma of roasted chestnuts drifts from a brazier on casters. The cellar is bundled in wrappings. Only his eyes show. When questioned about cost, he waves dismissively. Offer what you possess or promise me a tune. One youngster performs Deck the Halls while keeping 3 chestnuts airborne. Another delivers a verse about pudding and governance. An elderly man simply hums, "God rest ye merry," with a voice rough as weathered leather. Each departs, warmer. At the passageway's terminus you discover something unanticipated. A modest platform, hardly more than a box and a lantern. A young woman no more than 16 stands upon it, reading aloud from a worn volume. Her voice trembles, but her gaze burns fierce. It's a tale of a man who despised Christmas until a spectre revealed the truth. Not Dickens, not precisely, just similar enough to resonate familiar. The audience applauds when she concludes. A cap circulates, coins chime. Someone calls out, "Share another," and you grasp it. In this concealed corner of London, Christmas has evolved into performance. Not within grand theatres or ticketed spaces, but atop boxes, corners, and curbstones. It's unpolished, it's frigid, but it's genuine. And as darkness begins pressing its heavy thumb across the rooftops, that rawness transforms into something electric. Tales, melodies, joy, the kindling, and citywide they're igniting. Night in Victorian London descends like a dropping curtain, gradual, intentional, and weighty. Street lamps spark to life, one after another, their gaslight radiance casting golden halos on the damp cobbles. The atmosphere densifies with smoke and snow and the subtle scent of tallow from countless candles behind lace-covered windows. You find yourself pulled toward the waterway now, where the Thames snakes like a dark ribbon through the city's core. Along its edges, the atmosphere shifts. Less shimmer, more hush, but not emptiness. Something stirring here as well. A floating vessel near Southwark radiates faintly from inside. You draw near and detect voices, laughter, a whistle. Within, a crew of coal labourers off their shift, still soot-marked and exhausted, have converted their cramped dining hall into a holiday tavern. There's no keyboard instrument, but someone maintains rhythm on a bucket cover. Another fellow produces a harmonica and wheezes out a rough melody. There's a container of something potent, perhaps legal, perhaps otherwise. It circulates from palm to palm like sacred ritual. One man rises, shirt partially untucked, and delivers a poem about a rodent who infiltrated a bakery and absconded with a mince pie. The conclusion? The rodent declared it tasted superior to the compensation of transgression. The men roar. You notice a small evergreen branch fixed to the overhead. It's wilting, powdered with coal particles, but it's something. Someone's secured a crimson ribbon around it. Another has scribbled "Merry Whatnot" on the wall in chalk. It's messy, and it's magnificent. Not distant from the vessel, a woman in a substantial shawl establishes a table with metal cups and a steaming container. She distributes tea with condensed milk and narratives. For every cup dispensed, she provides a tale, some factual, some fabricated, to you. I'll share the one about the chimney lad who ascended into a flue and emerged with a sack of gold. To you, the girl who discovered a robin and maintained its warmth with buttons. Nobody challenges her, nobody minds what's accurate. On a seat nearby, a pair wrapped in a solitary coat hum a lullaby to their slumbering infant. The baby is swaddled so completely you can't even glimpse its nose, just a knitted cap shaped like a goose's head. The couple sways in rhythm, not to music, but to memory. And over all this, above the chill, the coal, the kettles, the deteriorating edges of the city, there's a feeling of something persisting. Not festivity exactly, but defiance. Because Christmas in this abandoned corner by the water is less about elation and more about refusing to surrender. You ascend the embankment stairs toward the bridges where several carriages rattle across slippery stones. One driver hums beneath his breath, another hurls a partially eaten apple to a child huddled by a lamp post. The child snags it, astonished. He doesn't consume it, just grips it like it might evaporate if he glances away. You pass a dock labourer, collapsed against a post, hands tucked in his sleeves. He glances up and grunts. Slightly warmer this evening must be the pudding vapours ascending from the affluent. He smirks, then he adds, quieter, or perhaps the phantoms are present. And just for an instant, the river appears to glimmer across the bridge. Now the city extends wide, its skyline a crooked crown of chimneys, steeples, and industrial stacks, expelling trails of smoke into the darkness. Here on the northern bank you find yourself in Clerkenwell, where the shadows extend long between tall structures and narrow courts. And here too, Christmas refuses to vanish. You slip into a print shop, long since shuttered to patrons, but animated with lamplight and the clack of a press still in operation. A lean man with ink-stained fingers feeds sheets into the apparatus, humming something that might once have been a carol. He's printing flyers for a Christmas pantomime, a makeshift performance platform in an abandoned warehouse for youngsters who wouldn't otherwise witness one. The flyer reads Pudding Pirates and a Magical Mop. 2 pennies or a grin. He beams when he notices you. Began as a jest, he says. Now we're completely booked. He raises one flyer to the lamplight and chuckles. Use my final bit of crimson ink to give the mop a cap. The ink smells sharp, metallic, strangely nostalgic. You tuck a flyer away. Further along, a row of laundresses sits outside a steam-stained structure, warming hands on cups of tea laced with vinegar and sugar. One of them pulls a cracker, not commercially purchased, but handmade with bits of twine and aged newspaper. It bursts like a pistol and out tumbles a bent spoon and a jest. What do you get when you cross a goose with a chimney, a bird that honks soot? They groan in unison, then erupt into cackling laughter. You proceed. A boarding house window is illuminated with rows of candles stuck in glass bottles. In each window pane, a face. Someone observing the world pass, too drained to participate, but too optimistic to look away. A young man raises his mug to you. No words, just acknowledgement. Down a side street you detect music. Violin this time, not professional, but fervent. A girl performs while her brother dances, stomping in rhythm atop a wooden crate. They've fastened bells to his sleeves, which jingle with every rotation. A cap lies open on the ground, filled with buttons, a partially eaten scone, and 3 farthings. Someone in the audience tosses in a candle stub. Another deposits a knitted mitten. A third places a crumpled piece of paper. The girl retrieves it later. It's a drawing of them, crude but sweet, sketched in pencil by a child. And there it is again, that strange generosity, that Victorian impulse to contribute, even if it's peculiar or small or completely worthless. A man with a sandwich board walks past, ringing a bell. His sign reads, "Don't forget, tomorrow is still winter." Nobody laughs. They just acknowledge, because it's truthful. Christmas is a brief enchantment, a flicker, and tomorrow the frost returns, the labour resumes, the ink dries, and the joy is harder to locate. But tonight, across rooftops and alleyways, that joy hangs in the atmosphere like chimney smoke, thin, persistent, impossible to capture. You pause at a crossroads where the street lamps form a glowing triangle. From every direction sounds trickle in, melodies, footsteps, a kettle's hiss, a child's giggle muffled by scarf and snow. And you realise something. It's not that people have forgotten this Christmas. It's that history forgot them. The ones who stitched joy out of nothing, who rewrote the season from the bottom up, who fashioned paper crowns out of butcher's wrap and laughter from breadcrumbs. You stand very still and the wind carries a scent you can't quite identify. Part coal, part cinnamon, part candle wax on aged wood. And, for a moment, you feel it. Not nostalgia, not sorrow. Something quieter. Recognition. It's well past midnight now and the city softens. The horses have gone quiet. The shopkeepers have secured their doors. Even the cold, seems to have settled into a steady breath, exhaling through alleys and down gutters like an elderly man sighing into his scarf. You follow the sound of footsteps, not your own, but a small, quick rhythm. Boots on cobblestone, then on gravel. You trace it to a courtyard behind a bakery where a girl, maybe 10 or 11, is rearranging empty crates into a square. She smooths a torn sheet across the top like a tablecloth. From her pocket, she produces a single biscuit, 2 buttons, and what appears to be a cork stopper. She places each item carefully at the corners of the cloth, as if they are gifts. She steps back, clasps her hands, and whispers, "Merry Christmas." Don't interrupt. This is her celebration. No audience, no script, no warm fire or proper tree. But the reverence is genuine. Across the square, a night watchman hums as he sweeps. You've seen him before, earlier in the story, remember? The one who kept time by the tower bells and shared a meat pie with the lamplighter. He's back now, his coat buttoned completely, moustache rimmed with frost. He notices the girl and tips his cap, doesn't speak, just nods and keeps sweeping in a slow circular rhythm that could almost be a dance. Back on the street, the last of the carolers trail home. One group of chimney sweeps, faces still streaked with soot, sing in harmony so loose they sound like waves lapping against a dock. Their lyrics morph mid-song into improvised verses about sausages and tumbling down chimneys. They pass a constable who doesn't stop them, just mutters, "Keep it cheerful, lads," and continues on. Not far off, a cat darts across your path, pausing to eye you like you're trespassing. Then it disappears into a crate marked "Eggs Handle with Care." It's unclear if there are still eggs inside. You drift further and come upon a pair of elderly sisters sitting on a bench, each wearing identical coats, one with a sprig of holly tucked into her hatband. They're peeling apples together, dropping the skins onto the pavement in long curls. They murmur to one another, then laugh, then fall silent again. One finally says, "Remember when Ma put cloves in everything, even the soap?" The other replies, "And we reeked like a roast." More laughter, then stillness. There is a special kind of intimacy that only arrives in the hours after midnight when the world isn't asleep, just paused. And in that pause these strange little scenes bloom like frost patterns on a window pane. In the distance the bell of St. Mary le Bow rings twice. You glance up, half expecting to see the stars, but London's sky is too thick tonight. Only the soft orange glow of lamps and fires bouncing off low clouds like a ceiling of embers. Still, you sense that up there something is watching, not judging, just bearing witness to the man lighting a pipe with a splinter from a Christmas crate, to the boy writing his name in snow with a stick, spelling it backwards, to the laundress hanging out a damp dress even now, hoping it might catch a breeze before morning, and to you, still walking, still curious, still awake. The farther you go, the quieter it becomes. Not silent, but thick with that sleepy hush cities only get in the folds between one day and the next. You pause beside a horse trough, frozen at the edges. A crow pecks at the ice, slips and flutters off, leaving a single black feather behind. You pocket it. No reason, just impulse. This night is full of odd little keepsakes. A few doors down you hear the soft shuffle of cards and low murmurs from behind a cracked open window. Inside, a group of seamstresses sits cross-legged on the floor, illuminated by lamplight and a half-burned tallow candle. They're playing a game of snap, but the deck has long lost its matching pairs. Each card is different, some hand-drawn replacements, others stolen from different games altogether. One girl slaps down a queen of spades with a cat's face drawn over it. Another lays a bent card that simply says Pudding King in charcoal scribble. When someone wins a round, they shout, "Merry Miss," instead of snap. One girl, no older than 15, ties a ribbon around her wrist every time she wins. By now she has 3. She says she'll trade them in the morning for extra tea. The others laugh, but she just shrugs. You never know. In another house, an elderly man is writing letters he'll never send. He seals each envelope with wax made from old candle stubs, addressing them to names you suspect are long gone. To Elsie, who baked the gingerbread, to Mr. Healy, who lent me the orange. He stacks them neatly, ties them with twine, and places them in a box labelled Winters. The lid won't quite close. At the bakery you passed earlier, the ovens are cold now, but the scent lingers. Vanilla, scorched sugar, yeast, and smoke. A boy kneels outside the shuttered door, nose pressed to the gap, breathing in dreams of rolls and warmth. Someone walks by and offers him half a meat pie wrapped in a handkerchief. The boy hesitates, then takes it wordlessly. The giver walks off without waiting, and that's how most kindness happens here. Wordless, unceremonious, passed like coals between cold hands. As you turn onto another lane, you notice the street is lined with buckets, not for fire, but for dripping icicles collected from eaves and windows. A curious tradition here. Some believe the melted water, when saved, brings luck. Others use it for brewing tea. A few just like the look of them. Crystal daggers growing from rooftops like decorations nature forgot to put away. Someone's trying to turn one into a flute. It doesn't work, but the effort earns a round of applause from a crowd of two. A woman with a sack of coal and her daughter in mismatched gloves. Up ahead, you see something glimmering, tiny, strange, hypnotic. You approach to find dozens of glass bottles hung from a fence, each with a candle inside. The flickering lights dance across the glass, creating an accidental constellation on the wall behind. Each bottle holds a scrap of paper, wishes you read. Warm shoes for mother, a chimney that doesn't smoke. Let her say yes. Pudding again, please. A man stands nearby tending the flames, replacing the candles as they burn out. He doesn't ask for coins, he doesn't speak, just keeps the lights going. Because in this city, on this forgotten Christmas, even the most fragile light deserves to last just a little longer. The night is nearly exhausted now, worn at the edges like a well-used apron, but you're not ready to let go of it yet. There's still something humming in the air, some thread you haven't followed, so you wander deeper into the city's forgotten folds. You turn into a narrow mews lane, barely wide enough for two people to pass without brushing coats. It's lined with coal sheds and stables, most shuttered tight. But a few doors are open, spilling yellow lamplight and the occasional murmur of voices. In one such stable, a family of 5 is camped for the night. Their landlord evicted them 2 weeks ago. Nothing unusual in London this winter, but the father found this corner and struck a deal with the stablemaster. Keep the place tidy, don't spook the horses, and you can sleep among the straw. You duck your head and step inside. The air is warm and smells of hay, sweat and oats. Not unpleasant. The father is mending his daughter's shoe with a length of twine and a nail he found in the street. The mother hums as she stirs a pot of something on a brazier made from an old tin. The youngest boy tugs on your sleeve and proudly shows you his toy, a spool of thread tied to a bent spoon. He calls it a rocket. You tell him it's marvellous. In the corner, someone's fashioned a tree out of broomsticks and rags. Buttons dangle like ornaments. A single candle burns in a clay jar at its base. It smells faintly of onions. The father looks up at you and says, "We told the children, the Queen gave us this room for Christmas." He smiles. It helps. And there it is again, the quiet pageantry of make-believe stitched into survival. A kingdom of coal dust and stories. You leave them to their warmth and make your way further north, toward Camden. The streets are emptier here, lined with row houses and occasional shop fronts. You pass a pawn shop window where someone has arranged their display into a makeshift nativity. Not religious, just familiar. A broken doll lies in a bed of cotton, surrounded by a tin soldier, a porcelain cat, and a shaving brush standing in for a shepherd's crook. A small sign reads, "None of them for sale. Just for looking." It's signed simply Bert. A few blocks over you hear singing. Not boisterous carols, but something softer, almost whispered. You follow it to a tenement block where a cluster of neighbours is gathered on the stoop, swaying in rhythm. Some wear hats, others drape blankets round shoulders. One woman sings while knitting, her needles clacking in time. Another keeps rhythm by tapping a spoon against a railing. A man plays a harmonica in a key that doesn't quite match, and yet it all fits. You lean against the opposite wall and close your eyes. The melody is imperfect but kind, and though you can't name the tune, you know the feeling, a lullaby for a city that refuses to stop dreaming. You leave the harmonica behind, but the tune lingers in your bones like the warmth of a vanished fire or the echo of laughter in an empty hallway. Camden at this hour feels like a different country. The city's usual roar is muffled, replaced by the soft language of boots on snow, the hush of breath in scarves and the whisper of curtains shifting behind closed windows. Up ahead you spot an odd little procession. 3 children in mismatched cloaks march down the pavement with the solemnity of knights. One carries a wooden spoon like a sceptre, another holds a candle in a teacup. The third, a girl with only one shoe, leads the group with an air of regal authority, clutching a crumpled paper crown. They stop suddenly in front of a worn wooden door, kneel, and sing something that sounds very much like "We Wish You a Merry Egg Tart." A man inside shuffles to the door, opens it, and without a word hands them a single potato. The girl lifts it high, like treasure. "It's warm," she declares. They cheer like they've won a kingdom, then march on. You trail behind them for a few steps, then turn toward a side alley where the gaslight flickers strangely. It's a dead end, but not empty. At the far wall sits an old woman on a crate, wrapped in layers of shawls. Before her lies a row of small figurines carved from candle wax. Animals mostly. A rabbit, a cat, a rather lumpy cow. They are surprisingly detailed, if not entirely accurate. When you approach, she doesn't ask for money. She just says, "Pick one that's yours." You choose the cat. She nods solemnly, wraps it in paper, and hands it over like a sacred relic. "It'll keep your soup from boiling over," she says. You nod, as if that makes perfect sense. Tonight, it somehow does. Back on the main road, you spot a boy standing on a crate with a pocket mirror, using it to reflect gaslight onto the street. "Moonlight for hire," he calls. "Romance guaranteed." No one stops, but he doesn't mind. He's got a scarf tied around his neck like a cravat, and the posture of someone who believes deeply that everything is better with a little theatre. Farther down you pass a row of tailor shops, all shuttered tight. But through the slats of one window you see a figure moving, curious. You crouch and peer in. Inside, an old tailor sits hunched over a sewing machine, stitching not clothes, but stories. Long strips of muslin bear embroidered phrases in mismatched thread. Snow in the pipes again, 3 buttons and a heartbeat. I kissed her behind the jam stall. They're draped across mannequins like scarves, hung from ceiling beams tied to doorknobs. The tailor hums softly, almost like a lullaby. It's unclear if these are memories, jokes, or riddles, but they live here, stitched into the air. Outside again the snow begins to fall. Not thick, just enough to soften the outlines of things. It dusts the window ledges, catches in gaslight, rests gently on the tops of carriages and hats. And the city breathes deeper. You pass a final window. Inside, a woman sits alone, painting ornaments onto oyster shells. Some are cracked. Others still smell faintly of the sea, but each one holds a shape. Trees, moons, stars, boots. She strings them together and hangs them like garlands. Then she steps back. admires her work and smiles. Not because it's perfect, but because it's finished. And that too is something to celebrate in this forgotten Christmas. You've drifted all the way south again, toward the riverside, where the air sharpens and carries that unmistakable scent of coal smoke, wet rope, and old fish barrels. The Thames, sluggish and half frozen, murmurs beside you like an old storyteller half asleep. Its banks are dotted with silhouettes. Dock workers, night fishermen, a few drunks curled in their coats like birds with their beaks tucked under wings. Just beyond the wharves, a row of shipping warehouses stretches out like the vertebrae of a sleeping giant. Most are dark, but one glows faintly orange through warped glass. You slip through a gap in the timber door. Inside, it's warmer than you'd expect. Dozens of dock hands have gathered in a half circle, sitting on crates, barrels, and heaps of old sailcloth. In the middle stands a man with a mop for a wig, a ladle for a sceptre, and a tablecloth wrapped round his shoulders like a royal cloak. "I present," he announces in his most theatrical voice, "the coronation of King Codswallop I." The room erupts in cheers and boot stomps. A boy no older than 16 is brought forward to the makeshift throne, a crate labelled "Pickled Gherkins Inedible." They crown him with a chipped chamber pot, and he accepts the honour with noble solemnity, even as his ears redden. Tonight, this is their holiday feast. A cod's head, a wheel of stolen cheese, one bottle of gin, and a half-frozen plum pudding, someone swears, is only a little bit haunted. You sit quietly and watch the play unfold. One part farce, one part wishful thinking. Each man takes a turn offering a toast, many of them absurd. To salt that never clumps. To boots that never leak. To the ghost of Christmas not showing up at all this year. The gin makes its way around the circle. No cups, just shared sips and careful passing. When it reaches you, they don't question your presence. They simply nod. Tonight, everyone gets a seat. After the toasts, they begin telling stories, not about kings or generals, but about near drownings. Tall tales spun for the foreman like the time Jenkins smuggled a goose onto a coal barge and claimed it could tally to 5. One fellow pulls a harmonica from his pocket and starts playing those long bending notes of a shanty tune. Another man whistles harmony. Some hum softly, and then something unexpected happens. The youngest dock worker rises and starts dancing, clumsy at first, then with confidence. His boots thump against the wooden planks in time. The men applaud. They holler. They forget momentarily their circumstances. Even the man wearing the King Codswallop crown dabs his eyes and says, "Not terrible for a kid with 2 left feet and cotton for brains." Outside, snow starts falling again. Thicker now. It settles on the warehouse roof with a soft whisper. Nobody gets up to leave. Not quite yet. The heat here doesn't come from the flames. It comes from something far more difficult to transport. Mutual absurdity, wounded dignity, and the stubborn pleasure of remaining standing when the world keeps trying to flatten you. You slip away quietly, one final acknowledgement to the kingdom of nonsense, and step back into the silence. Out on the wharf, the snow falls heavier now, blanketing the weathered ropes, the gnawed crates, the corroded iron mooring posts. It muffles the river sounds until the water appears to flow without noise, like a whisper threading through the city's backbone. You walk beside the Thames, boots grinding through frozen slush. Now and then a far-off bell chimes. A vessel moored just past the mist, its chain creaking in complaint as it rocks. But nearer, another sound gets your attention, tapping. Steady, wooden, deliberate. You trace it to a shack of salvaged wood and metal squeezed between 2 warehouses. A lamp dangles above the entrance, throwing amber patterns onto the snow beneath. Inside, a woman hunches at a crude workbench surrounded by damaged umbrellas, countless of them, some ripped, others twisted at strange angles, a handful with handles fashioned from spoons, chair legs, or even a violin bow. She's fixing them one after another, securing joints with twine, swapping fabric with wire, waxed paper, applying candle wax to seal the edges. She doesn't glance up when you walk in. "Storm's approaching," she says. "Might as well prepare." You ask who needs them. She shrugs. Whoever gets caught out there. Behind her, a wall displays chalk markings and names. You spot a few folks you've encountered in previous corners of this wandering Christmas. Bert, the boy with the looking glass, the girl with the single shoe, even King Codswallop. When she completes an umbrella, she opens it, lifts it toward the light to check its span, then props it gently against the wall. It's not really about the umbrella. It's about choosing to be someone who mends things in a fractured city. Back outside, you notice something peculiar. A row of coins pressed into the snow, each pointing to a different item. A teacup, a shoe, a tin whistle. They create pathways, like markers on a game board or hints in a puzzle. You follow one to a man sleeping beneath a blanket of newspapers, the final coin sitting beside his extended hand. You place one of your own. The snow continues falling, falling. You walk until your muscles protest. Your scarf stiffens with ice, and your fingers turn crimson despite your gloves. And precisely when you're considering turning around, you discover something surprising. A bench. Simply a bench, but recently cleared. A cushion placed on it, and a small card resting on the seat. It says, "For whoever needs to rest." There's no signature, no reason given. Just compassion left behind in a world that seldom pauses long enough to see. You sit, you exhale, and as the wind sweeps gently off the water, you understand something straightforward but striking. This is Christmas. Not the Christmas of sparkle and carols and decorated windows, but the Christmas of quiet resistance, of mended boots and shared laughter, of empty pockets and still discovering something to offer. The kind you've witnessed tonight, the kind the world overlooks, except for the people who experience it and the people like you who keep it alive. You wake to the scent of smoke and bread, not charred, not stale, but warm and substantial. The kind that fills your nose and murmurs, someone is baking, something worth rising for. It's morning, though the sun hasn't fully decided to appear yet. Just a thin glow seeping over the rooftops, touching chimney stacks in diluted gold. London spreads beneath it, like a body just waking, moaning, popping its joints, stretching through alleyways and coal shafts. You're in Spitalfields now, or close by. You can't quite recall how you arrived here, only that you drifted east until the city's rhythm shifted. The streets here are tighter, the buildings more ancient, half devoured by soot and time. And yet there's vibrancy. Painted signs, fractured blue shutters, a yellow door held open with a boot. That's the source of the smell. Inside the cramped shop, there's a woman with flour dusting her elbows and a loaf in each palm. One burnt, one flawless. She's grumbling something about proportions and payback as she arranges them next to a line of irregularly shaped rolls. Some are twisted like ropes, others formed like stars or creatures. A boy leans across the counter, concentrating. She nods, then passes him the burnt one. He grins like he's just received a treasure. "You get the perfect one tomorrow," she says. That's how it works. That's the principle here, apparently. First arrival, last priority, backwards fairness bread style. The woman spots you and tilts her head toward the shelf. "Choose one," she says. "No payment. Just pick." You pause, then select the star-shaped roll. It's still hot. You thank her, but she's already returned to the oven, elbows deep in another struggle of dough and flame. Outside, you drift through the early light, roll in hand, and the city feels altered. Not improved, just conscious. You pass a man painting over graffiti with deliberate, meticulous strokes, not to remove it, but to enhance it. The original message reads, "No hope." He adds punctuation and a name. No hope, M. Around the bend, Two old men are playing cards on a crate. The winner of each round gets to declare a truth. The war mattered. The train will return. The dog actually ate the ham. They debate it like scholars, not simpletons. You grin and continue walking. At the boundary of a market square, you discover what appears to be an abandoned bandstand, but someone's converted it into a lost and found. Scarves dangle from pegs. Gloves are strung across cord like drying socks. A note is attached to each, too delicate to keep. Not mine, but once was. Take it if it feels familiar. It's not systematic, it's not practical, but it is profoundly chaotically human. You observe a man pinning up another glove. He turns to you and shrugs. Everything deserves another shot, right? Even mittens. You nod. You don't claim one, but you leave behind the wax cat from before, carefully tucked into an empty mug on the shelf in case someone else requires a soup charm more than you. The market square is stirring now, cautiously, like an old man opening one eye and complaining at the sky. Stalls begin to unfold slowly, sacks of parsnips hauled into place, turnips piled like cannonballs, someone grumbling about apples gone mushy with frost. You meander through it gradually, dodging puddles past the fishmonger shouting cheerful abuse at a boy attempting to swipe a herring. The boy fails. The fishmonger still hands him half a smoked mackerel. Good effort, but your timing needs work, he says, brushing fish scales off his sleeve. There's a woman selling damaged toys, not repairing them, just selling them as they are. Dolls lacking eyes, tin soldiers minus rifles, a music box that rattles instead of playing. She's displayed them thoughtfully, each with a handwritten label, still courageous, dreams in motion, not done breaking. You can't help but respect the transparency. Then someone grabs you aside. An elderly man with a face like melted candle wax and a walking stick that's clearly just a broom handle whittled to fit. He says nothing, just gestures. You follow through a narrow passage between buildings, through an archway with ivy-like green vapour, past a wall covered with chalk figures, little stick people dancing, tumbling, laughing. And there it stands, the Christmas tree. No ceremony, no watchers, just a tree standing in a small courtyard, abandoned by the city but somehow fully adorned, not with ornaments and candles, but with objects. Buttons, keys, fabric scraps, a tiny shoe, a ladle, a corkscrew tied with a red string. A tag dangles from a low branch. Gifts we never gave, memories we never preserved. There's nobody else here, but somehow you sense dozens of eyes observing gently from windows, from stairwells, from behind curtains. You step closer and instinctively pull something from your coat pocket, the oyster shell ornament painted faintly with a lopsided moon. You attach it to a branch, fingers frozen from the cold, and step back. The tree doesn't gleam, it doesn't sing, it doesn't guarantee anything, but it contains things. That's sufficient. And somehow it seems like everyone in the story you've encountered tonight has contributed something here. The harmonica boy, the potato girl, the dock workers, the umbrella mender, the bread lady, even King Codswallop. They've all placed tokens onto this tree, silent acts of remembrance, small anchors against oblivion. You remain there for a long while. Eventually a quiet voice says, "It's nice, isn't it?" You turn. It's the girl with one shoe. She's clutching the potato, cold now, wrapped in a bit of cloth. "I'm keeping it," she whispers, "in case tomorrow's harder." You don't know how to respond, so you just nod. She smiles, then indicates the ornament you just attached. "That's the moon, right?" You nod again. "I like it," she says. "It looks weary." Then she dashes off barefoot again, laughing like it's the warmest day of summer. You look at the tree one final time. It looks weary too, but it's still upright, just like you. The snow has started to melt, not rapidly, not altogether, but in that gradual, stubborn way that only London snow manages, melting from the ground up, leaving slush that seeps into your boots and paints the cobbles with dirty lace. It's nearly the close of the day. You can sense it in your bones, in the way the city sighs. The fog has retreated just a fraction, revealing silhouettes of rooftops like drawings made in soot. Chimneys expel one last cloud before falling silent. And you, still roaming, find yourself somewhere unanticipated, a narrow garden behind a tenement building. You wouldn't have seen it if not for the sound of a broom sweeping rhythmically across stone. Back and forth, not rushed, not hostile, just methodical. An old woman is clearing snow from a path that leads to nowhere, literally. It stops at a brick wall. You observe her a moment before asking the obvious. She stops, leans on her broom and says, "Well, if someone's going to walk in loops, they may as well not stumble doing it." Then she smiles. Her name is Mrs. Plim, she informs you. She's resided here 62 years. She once laboured in a hat factory. She once danced with a man who never contacted her again. She once attempted to sell jam at a street fair and got arrested accidentally for participating in an illegal demonstration. It was the sign, she says. Read more fruit for the people. Apparently that was deemed rebellious in 1897. She laughs, then offers you a biscuit from a tin shaped like a lion. It tastes like chalk, sugar and rebellion. Then she shows you her winter tree. Not outdoors, not decorated, just a small fir branch nailed to her wall. Inside, on it, hangs every Christmas card she's ever gotten, even the ones that weren't really intended for her. Ones she discovered on the street or retrieved from bins or borrowed from people who didn't value them. I prefer the ones that say to someone special, she says, tapping one with a mittened finger. You'd be surprised how many people discard those. She motions for you to sit. There's only one chair, so she perches on an overturned bucket and she shares stories, not about herself this time, but about people she's encountered. A man who constructed tiny ships inside light bulbs. A girl who grew teeth in the wrong locations. A parrot that cursed in 5 languages and prayed in Latin. A chimney sweep who sang opera on rooftops and once set fire to a bishop's laundry by accident. None of them are living now, but you can tell they are still very much with her and somehow now with you. She pauses after one story and says, "Everyone assumes memory is like a photograph, but it's not. It's like steam. It touches everything, and then it vanishes unless you breathe it in." You sit there until the biscuit tin is bare and her broom rests quietly against the door. Then she says, "Off you go." I think the night's got one last thing to reveal to you, so you leave the taste of chalky sugar still on your tongue and step back into the soft melting night. The city is more subdued now, not sleeping. London never truly sleeps, but more subdued in the way that counts. Footsteps are gentler, voices softer. Even the horses pulling late carts seem to clip-clop with more caution, as if they too are trying not to disturb something delicate. You walk past windows radiating orange with hearthlight, past boots drying on doorsteps, their leather steaming, past doors left open just wide enough for a cat to slip through or a song to leak out, faint traces of violin maybe, or a broken music box, or someone humming to themselves while repairing a coat. You don't pursue any of them. Instead, your feet guide you somewhere unexpected, one final destination. The old iron gate swings open without effort, and you step into a garden you swear wasn't present before. It's circular, peaceful, empty, except for a bench and a tree stump carved into the shape of a clock face, with no hands. You sit, and for a moment, nothing occurs. But then footsteps, familiar ones. A boy with a cracked mirror wedged under his arm. The girl with one shoe, and her wrapped potato, the fishmonger's helper now chewing on the last piece of smoked mackerel, King Codswallop in his paper crown. The umbrella mender, the bread lady, Mrs. Plim with her biscuit tin. All of them. They sit next to you, or near you, or facing you. Nobody speaks a word, but one by one they begin laying things on the stump. A button, a cork, a harmonica reed, a wool fragment shaped like a star, the wax cat, and finally the oyster shell moon. You add nothing. You've already contributed yours. Instead, you just observe as the clock stump begins to shine faintly, not with magic, not with fire, but with something warmer and more ancient. Memory, shared, tangible, actual. Then the tree above it releases. A single leaf, just one, paper thin, etched with veins like handwriting. It settles in your lap. You lift it up on it, written in ink that glimmers faintly. Remember this, that's all. You look up and they've vanished, every one of them. But the garden's still present, and the bench, and the tree stump, and the leaf. So maybe that's the meaning. Maybe this was the forgotten Christmas. Not because it was insignificant or quiet or ordinary, but because it wasn't remembered sufficiently. Because its gifts weren't packaged. Because its kindnesses were whispered. Because its heroes were unremarkable. Because its magic was gradual, but not anymore. Now you remember, and you carry it with you, in the soles of your boots, in the weight of your coat, in the steam of a shared cup of tea, in the sound of a match striking in the darkness you stand. The snow begins again, soft, fresh, like the city is starting over. And somewhere in a room you'll never visit, someone's writing your name on a card that says to someone special. They won't discard it. They'll preserve it, just in case you forget. Because the reality is, you never really walk through a story like this alone. And now that our peculiar little journey is at its conclusion, it's time to rest, friend. You've walked a considerable distance tonight, through alleys and markets, over frozen bridges, down stairwells and into borrowed memories. You've encountered people who don't typically make it into the history books, and yet somehow they're the ones holding everything together with buttons, with bread, with umbrellas and oyster shells. You've witnessed how a Christmas can exist without tinsel or fanfare, how it can survive in scraps and laughter and second-hand biscuits. You've seen that memory isn't always about the grand and the gold. It can live in broken dolls, chalky footprints, and a tree that nobody notices unless they need it. And now it's okay to let the world fade. Let the fog roll in. Let the snow muffle your thoughts. Let the clock stop ticking for a little while. You're safe here. You're part of this strange, forgotten story now, and it remembers you even if you forget it for a time. So close your eyes, breathe in deep, feel the city settle, the river slow, the lanterns flicker just a little dimmer. And as you drift off, know this. Somewhere, someone saved a seat for you on a bench you'll find again. Maybe not tomorrow, but when you need it most.